April 4th, 2018 morning session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Here. Oh, it's the new order.
Yes.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaley.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Colleagues, before we start, I want to make note of the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I had the privilege of hearing one of his children on the radio this week. And it was a really fantastic interview. And he talked about how people did not appreciate how radical or how revolutionary Dr. King really was. And he was so revolutionary in his views pertaining to nonviolent protest and pertaining to his vision of humanity that we still have not, 50 years later, lived up to the call that he put down for all of us. He preached about nonviolence, and he meant it in the true tradition of turning the other cheek. And he talked a lot about the philosophy of society that he called the beloved community. And that's always been really inspirational to me as somebody in a position of public leadership and public responsibility. This concept of the beloved community, one which is just, one which is equitable, one which is inclusive, one where economic prosperity would be shared. And he talked about all of those things individually and separately. And I've also been struck by his just unfailing optimism in humanity. And if you go back and you listen to his final sermons, you know he wasn't going to make it. He knew it. He knew he had gone to the mountaintop. He said he had, but he knew that he was not long for this world. That's my interpretation of his last sermon. But he still didn't lose that undying optimism and hope for humanity. And that should be an inspiration to all of us. And so I just didn't want this opportunity to go by on this 50th anniversary. Could we just please share a moment of silence to reflect? Thank you. I appreciate it. Carla, first up is communications. Oh, I'm sorry, we have our statement to read. Sorry, legal counsel, thank you.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you. Communications. So we're going to do an experiment here, folks. The first individual for communications, for reasons I am not privy to, has apparently been excluded. He has asked that he be able to provide his testimony via audio tape in support of his First Amendment right to address this council. I will allow it. We'll call it an experiment. We'll see how it goes. So the first individual, please.
Item 308, request of Barry Joe Stull to address council regarding Barry Joe Stull.
And if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record.
My name's Barry Joe Stull, and I signed up to be on the agenda. And there's an unresolved matter of my lifetime exclusion from City Hall that was produced in December of 2015, and I know now from the trial testimony from various city agents that that trespass exclusion itself was based on things that are just factually not true. So since then, of course, in that same December of 2015, Federal Judge Simon ruled in Joe Walsh's case about the city trespass policy being unconstitutional on its face. So I'm appearing here this morning in this capacity because I have some things I want to share with the city in spite of my being excluded from City Hall in what I'm sure will prevail as a bogus policy. I was on the agenda in November of 2015, and I was arrested at City Council, and I was taken into custody, and 76 days later, the state moved to dismiss a felony charge of my assault on a public safety officer, which was Portland Police Bureau Officer Engstrom. And since that time, there's been a trial and there's been an appeal, and the State Office of Public Defense Services got an opening appellant's briefs, an excerpt of record in the two cases I had, both stemming from November of 2015, with the arrest and custody that followed at City Hall being the second of those two events. When I was in custody, of course, Judge Simon ruled on the trespass policy being unconstitutional, and in addition to that, I saw some really terrible things, and one of the things happened was a gal wasn't getting water. Her water had been turned off, and the facility had a wiring problem, and she was begging for water, and my resolution of that was to stick my foot in the toilet and flush it, I'd estimate 100 times, until finally got the attention of the staff, and they finally addressed the fact that this woman beside me was being tortured. So I'm going to prevail on appeal. Both of the cases call for reversals. I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak to you. I will be sharing those opening appellant's briefs. My pro se supplemental briefs are due tomorrow on April 5th, 2018, and the Attorney General will respond sometime in August 2018 if there aren't further delays. So thanks for having me this morning. I hope you're all well. Barry Joe Stull, signing off.
Thank you. And sir, could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Moses Rosen, and I just wanted to say happy Passover, and may the prayers of the homeless clog your toilets.
Thank you. Next, communications, please.
Item 309, request of Lightning Super Justice Watchdog to address council regarding Metro $500 million affordable housing bond.
Good morning.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Justice Watchdog. I, Lightning, would like to declare a state of emergency for homeless children and students in the state of Oregon. As of 2017, we had approximately 22,541 homeless students. Again, understand that number does not include their parents, which would be families. And again, understand that number does not, and this only includes people currently enrolled in the school system for them to be able to do the data. The number is alarming. The number has to be looked at. I have asked for an audit to be done on Oregon Department of Education to review any and all data that they currently have. I am asking that we have the information provided to the public. Again, pertaining to the Metro bond itself, they were around $500 million. I had discussions with them and said, I think it's a little bit on the low side for a regional bond. I asked for $750 million at their council meeting. They have come back at $1 billion. I absolutely agree with their number of $1 billion. I think the information from FM3 will substantiate that and the need for it. And when you just look at how many homeless children and youths, just alone in Metro is approximately 7,800. And also understanding when you look and break down the schools themselves, such as Beaverton, 1,522 homeless students in 2017. Portland, 1,509. Reynolds, approximately 1,200. When you start calculating these numbers, again, those are enrolled in the school, which they can obtain the data. This is not including the people that are currently out in their cars and possibly tents and possibly not being able to get that data. We are in a crisis for the homeless children and students. I Lightning am taking it upon myself where the Governor Brown has failed on this issue, and I Lightning am declaring a state of emergency for homeless children and students at this time, and I'm asking Governor Brown to address this immediately, provide the proper data, and understand the $1 billion Metro bond is a beginning, part of the solution, moving forward on this in an aggressive manner to have real solutions, not shelters, not motels, not doubling up, but real solutions of permanent housing for the homeless children. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Next individual, please.
Item 310, request of Star Stoffer to address council regarding conduct unbecoming of a publicly elected official and police accountability.
I don't see Star here today. Next individual, please.
311, request of Chuck Crochette to address council regarding misrepresentation of African American community needs being ignored.
He's not here, I'm sorry. Next individual, please.
Item 312, request of Lowell John Mitchell to address council regarding guidance for police per ACLU. He has had to reschedule.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us through that.
You put it off for 2 months. You're almost there.
Mr. Walsh, please don't disrupt the council hearing.
Why don't you change it?
We have not changed anything with regard to communications. Every city council
You've
session
almost
starts
eliminated
with,
communications.
we have not eliminated communications. Are there any items that have been pulled off of the consent agenda?
I've had no request.
Call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please. We're going to read items 313 and 314 together, please.
313, accept a grant in the amount of $112,500 from Metro for the Rossi Farms Development Plan and authorize an intergovernmental agreement. And 314, accept a grant in the amount of $125,000 from Metro for expanding opportunities for affordable housing in faith communities and authorize an intergovernmental agreement.
Colleagues, we're here today to approve 2 intergovernmental agreements and accept 2 grants from Metro. The first item, number 313, it's a grant for $112,500 for the Rossi Farms Development Plan. The second item, number 314, is a grant of $125,000 for expanding opportunities for affordable housing in faith communities. The first Metro Construction Excise Tax, otherwise known as the CET grant, will help to fund a project to develop a concept plan for development for the 20-plus acre site, which is in East Portland. The second Metro grant will help fund partnerships with faith-based communities to develop affordable housing. Bureau Planning and Sustainability staff, Eric Engstrom, Barry Manning, and Ann Stark, could you come on up and let's go through these items. And if you could start us off, please, with an overview, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Eric Engstrom. I'm with Planning and Sustainability. With me is Nan Stark and Barry Manning, who will be the project managers for these projects. I want to start by just thanking Metro for their decision to fund these two projects. Both of these projects will help us further the new 2035 comprehensive plan goals and align with both city and regional policies. The grants provide funding for projects that might otherwise not be undertaken based on availability of local resources, and so we appreciate the opportunity to use the Metro resources. Barry will talk a little bit about the Rossi Farms project, and Nan will talk a little bit about the faith-based affordable housing project.
Great, thanks. Good morning. Barry Manning, Planning and Sustainability staff. Talking a little bit about the Rossi Farms development project. We're looking forward to beginning work on the Rossi Farms development plan. The grant will help fund consultant services and staff resources to develop a concept plan for this site. The site is one of the last remaining large undeveloped parcels within the city of Portland. I've got a PowerPoint slide of the aerial of the site I can show you at the end of this. We want to note, and I think it's important to note, that while the project was labeled and submitted as the Rossi Farms Development Plan, the site is actually owned by and supported in this grant by several families, the Rossi families, the Justo families, and the Gary families, so it's a combination of ownerships there. The Park Grove School District is also in the study area and has a small parcel that's in the focus area and is a property owner in the area as well, so there's substantial interest there. The site's located, as you may well know, on a prominent corridor, 122nd Avenue. It's proximate to several schools, including Park Rose High School and Beach Park. So this offers a really unique opportunity for placemaking in an area in Northeast Portland. The site is also in an area that we feel could potentially benefit from new investment in community-serving commercial activities, perhaps a grocery store, as well as housing that serves a variety of income levels. Both of these aspects would help complete and work towards accomplishing goals in the comprehensive plan for complete communities. The project, as I noted, is supported by the families who own portions of the site, as well as the Park Rose School District, TriMet, and the Park Rose Neighborhood Association, who all submitted letters of support. And I just want to conclude that our collective goal with this project is to really develop a thoughtful concept plan that meets the goals of the city, the community, Metro, and local stakeholders, while providing a viable path forward for the property owners of the site. And Carla, if you could, oh, you have it up there, great. That's showing the entire study area outlined in yellow, and you can see that there is some undeveloped farmland in there to the right of the screen, which is to the east of 122nd. And the next slide here shows a red.
Before you move from that slide, in the
Are you back at the first slide you're saying? Yeah.
one that you're at right now, next to the middle school, it's included an area of, looks like single-family homes. Are those all independently owned?
Towards the north of the study area?
Yes.
Some of them are part of this ownership. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
Kind of bottom left. I don't know whether that's north or south. The single-family homes that are right next to it, I believe that's the middle school.
Yes, single-family houses on the bottom, I'm looking at the bottom right, and the bottom left, yes, those would be individual houses in that area. I'll have to do some research on that to clarify exactly what the property ownership is in that area.
Yeah, I'm just interested as to why that's included in the planning area.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Apartments that are within the study area but are not included in the focus area of the study, which let me show you on the next slide what that is. So you can see the red dashed area here. That really is clarifying. This is the focus area for the majority of the work that will be undertaken with this development study, and that includes the Rossi, Gary, and Justo properties, as well as a small portion of the Park Rose School District properties.
So then the next question is, why not the bottom right or the far right of that area?
Which would be the City of Portland Beach Park area, I believe, if I'm looking at what you're referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nan Stark.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. I'm Nan Stark. I'm the North and Northeast District Liaison with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And I'll be managing the $125,000 grant called Expanding Opportunities for Affordable Housing in Faith Communities. This grant will provide an opportunity for the city to partner with several organizations representing the faith community of Portland, as well as with several community development organizations. Grant money will be used to develop concept plans and financial feasibility analyses for 3 sites that will be selected. Engagement with leaders of faith communities will provide practical steps for other congregations to pursue housing projects consistent with their missions. The desired outcome of this grant is to create plans for developing affordable housing on land owned by religious institutions. This will serve as a model for other such institutions to follow in the future to address the affordable housing crisis. Any questions?
Are there specific, you said there are 3 specific sites that will be looked at?
No, they are to be selected.
Oh, they are to be selected.
Through the process. Yep.
Commissioner Fritz.
I have a question for Barry, and that is on the development agreement. Is there a development agreement for the Rossi Farms project?
There is no development agreement to date. That could be a potential outcome of the study. Really, the intention here is to develop a concept plan that gives direction to potential development on the site. And then as we explore some of the issues that are at play there, one of the outcomes could be some form of an agreement, but that's not anticipated up front.
So could you talk a little bit about the construction excise tax grants from Metro, what the rules are for those? I'm interested in why city money and Metro money is going into a planning, what's basically going to be a private development. And I may defer to,
I'll defer to Eric on that one since he's been more involved in those projects.
The Metro construction excise tax money, this grant program is intended to further the objectives of the 2040 Metro plan. And this is the focus of that grant program, is to provide development assistance for key parcels that some of which are at the edge of the UGB where we've recently expanded, and others are internal to the UGB. There's an allocation of money to those 2 different purposes. But it's typical within this program that we do private-public planning partnerships on private land. Basically, the intent of the program is to develop plans that help us meet public goals for the development of those properties and work with the property owners to further the potential development that's consistent with our planning goals.
So thank you. That explains the $112,500 from Metro. There's a $50,000 Bureau of Planning, basically general fund match for this. What's the basis for choosing to put general fund money into essentially a private development?
We have, in our planning activities, we typically are involved in private-public planning activities because the majority of land in the city is privately owned. So, our planning activities extend well beyond just looking at publicly owned land. The River District in the Central City, South Waterfront are other examples where we've put public money into development planning for private sites. That's very common in our work.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Very good. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
Is there a public testimony on these items, Carla, please?
We have 2 people signed up.
Great.
Shedrick Wilkins and Joe Walsh.
Good morning.
Yes, I know about Rossi Farms. I'm Mr. Shedrick. I was raised there. I was raised in 70th and Sandy. I used to pick strawberries. I don't know if Rossi Farms when I was like in high school and stuff like that. My feeling is about immigration. A lot of Hispanics from Mexico have farm jobs. Cesar Chavez, who was a union activist for farm workers, is equally as important as Dr. King, even 39th, named after him. I think those kind of skills for farm work is the basis. It's hard to really pick strawberries or fruits with a machine. It bruises the fruit. So in California and Oregon, we have this relationship with farm workers. I like the area too because I love the campus of Mount Hood Community College, where people can, while they're doing janitorial jobs or farm jobs, they can learn skills to do more than that, or technical and scientific training. I mean, you could get 2 years at Mount Hood and then go to Oregon State, become a scientist or something, but you get a start there. So I like that area. If I have to be stuck in Portland the rest of my life, I will move out there. I believe in that area. And, you know, and you can see Mount Hood, where, you know, the water and the stuff like that. I finally want to say too that even on that, next week I'm going out to Mount Hood Community College, and about immigration here, I guess a Mount Hood Community College school board guy said there were too many Hispanics in the campus. He got voted out 80% by a woman for saying something like that. And he's an example why we will accept immigrants, like California. And again, I like that area. And I used to look up at the jet planes and think maybe these people flying in jets are eating strawberries that people picked on the ground, stuff like that.
Thank you. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. Good morning, sir.
Go ahead. I'm having, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. I'm having some trouble breathing, so I would ask for your patience. In the presentation, I heard the word affordable housing used, and I want the people that are watching this to understand something. Affordable housing terminology is from HUD. It means nothing. Nothing. It has no correlation, no relationship to our homeless problem, our houses problem, or people that are suffering being let go. Nothing. It is up to you. It is up to the people that get the grant. It is up to the goodwill of you. Because it means nothing, means anything you want it to mean. You can have 80%, you can have 60%, you can have 30%. And unless it's in writing, it means nothing. So I want the people to understand that when they hear the terminology, affordable housing, it's a con job. It's a political con job. And you got them all convinced. You use really good sugar words. You got them all convinced that you're doing everything you can to solve a lot of our problems in the streets and people that are dropping out. That Mr. Lightning told you is phenomenal. Even Mark, your director of the Joint Housing Committee, or the director of the agency or department or whatever he's called this month, says that there's 16,000 people living by their fingertips and they keep dropping off. That's your affordable housing. You have to have money to get into affordable housing. I am affordable housing. I'm retired, so I could qualify for affordable housing, but I have to have some money. People on the street have no money. So it's a con job. You use the word, and then you use the word, well, we're going to help the people get off the street, and that is BS. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Don't thank me, Mayor.
I didn't. Good morning.
Thank you.
I hope you're feeling better. Thank you. Bye-bye.
My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Justice Watchdog. I do agree with both the grants from Metro. I think it's important to get that data in front of us to understand what can be done with certain properties. I understand on the Rossi development, they're looking at a tremendous amount of affordable housing at this time. So I do think it's necessary to start looking at the properties and understanding what can and can't be done with them toward affordable housing. Now, pertaining to the faith-based groups on the churches, I absolutely agree on this. I understand there's approximately 500 faith communities out there that have additional land. Again, I will stress to the faith-based communities, focus on this Metro bond and understand that the $1 billion, if we also amend the Constitution, can possibly go in this direction. And again, my projection at about $1 billion would be talking anywhere from 3,500 to 4,500 if we use an analysis of 300,000 per unit new inventory. That means creating a lot of jobs through the community, buying materials in the local community, and understanding that the benefits of this are tremendous at this time. So again, to the faith-based communities, get over to Metro, look up Metro, and understand there will be stakeholder and technical meetings, which they'll have everybody there, all the mayors and various mayors from all different locations, and attend these meetings to get a clear understanding on where you might fit in on this bond. And again, like I've stated, at the end of the day, on any of this, it comes down to the resources. It comes down to having the money there. That's what this bond is. And again, from Commissioner Salzman, Mayor Wheeler on the city bond at $258 million, if we get a $1 billion bond from Metro, we're talking $1,258 million toward housing. Again, I'll just use the term housing for the most vulnerable to get them in. And again, this is the ability to do that, the resources to do that, and everything on paper looks good, but it's the resources that make it into reality. It's the resources that get the people off the streets into housing. Again, focus on the $1 billion bond. It's going to be put on the ballot in November, and they need your assistance at this time. Again, great work to the faith-based communities, and good luck on your projects. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
There we go. My name is Mary Sipe. I'd like to address the term affordable housing. I do think that it's a little bit misleading. Most people, when they think affordable, they think I have a job, this is what I can afford. The term low income, working poor might better reflect what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. And I think we have to think about the fact that in addressing our homeless crisis, we also have to address the future, not just what's happening today. I think about the fact that so many people's wages have been stagnant for years. People working on minimum wage are people that no longer do we have the luxury of corporate-sponsored pension plans. We have 401ks and other, vehicles that people can put their money into to build a retirement fund. But when you're the working poor, you can't build a retirement fund. So what we have, and you also probably are never going to be able to buy a home. So what we have is we have a generation and a couple of generations of workers that are going to be lifetime renters. They are going to be at the mercy of the market. And they're also probably going to have nothing but Social Security to live on when they retire. And we have to be thinking about those people and the people who are disabled, who are living on SSI. Many of the people that are out on the street right now probably qualify for SSI and food stamps and could get into affordable low-income housing if it were available. When I moved into the affordable income-restricted housing development that I live in, almost 8 years ago, I was on a waiting list for 9 months. And actually, I got called at 3 months, but my lease where I was at wasn't up, and I was able to get in 9 months. Today, that same building, it takes about 4 years to get into. And on top of that, in my neighborhood, almost 600 additional units have been built within a 6-block radius of where I live. So I think we have to be really careful when we talk about what we're addressing and not just dismiss affordable housing as not helping the people that are on the street right now. We have to also be thinking about the people that could end up on the street tomorrow or the day after because we don't have any safety net to catch those people and help those people. And so I just want to say anything I see with affordable housing does not make me angry. It makes me very happy, and it makes me feel much more secure in this community.
Mary,
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment? Because I think the language has become very confusing. And I think what we have to often remind ourselves is the question is affordable to whom? Over 95% of the housing that the market is creating in this community is luxury housing. So it is what the market will bear at the high end. That is not the kind of housing that people who are at 60% of median family income or below can afford to live in. So if we acknowledge that there's a mismatch between what the market's creating and what a whole lot of people need, we then understand what government's role is and whether it's a carrot or a stick. If we don't act, we're not going to make a dent in that 24,000 to 30,000 units that we need to serve people who are sort of working class and below on the economic ladder. And when I use the term affordable housing, I'm talking about people who have either no assets and resources or up to about 60%. But again, I think it is important that we ask the question, affordable to whom? We all want to live in a city where people of all incomes can afford to live here. That's accepted. Middle income, working class, the very poor, and people of means. The problem is the market is now almost exclusively producing housing at the high end. And that's why we, using the bond measure, inclusionary housing, tax abatements, things like CDBG and home and other tools, are trying to create incentives for housing the market doesn't serve. And those are the people, in my opinion, who are at the most need of government assistance. It's uniquely what our role is, and that's what I think we generally mean when we talk about affordable housing.
Exactly. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So I'd like to chime in too, and I'm always a little disappointed that Mr. Walsh, he comes and he throws his bomb in the middle of the room, and then he picks up and he leaves, and then he never gets to hear the thoughtful conversation that he actually helped create. And that's just too bad. I use the words affordable housing to mean any number of things, but they all mean one thing in common, and that is below market rate. And during my campaign, I knew that people were confused by the term affordable housing, so I started saying workforce and low income and very low income housing. And then hilariously, the conversation came back to, well, what do you mean? Which takes us right back to the HUD definition of affordability. 80% AMI, 60% AMI, 0 to 30% AMI. And then people say, well, what does that mean? And it's back to housing that's less than market rate for people who work and people of lower income and very low income. So it's a big sort of non-virtuous circle of semantics. What we mean when we are talking about affordable housing for these particular ordinances is to do a study and look at the range of options, all the way from 0 up to 80% AMI. And when proposals finally come before this board, we will be talking about very specific levels of affordability and for whom. And if people stick around for a few minutes, we're going to hear from the Northeast Housing Oversight Committee, and we're going to be very specific about affordability and home ownership and the challenges that are there, particularly for our Black community, but that are generally applicable to the entire community. So I don't want us to get too bogged down on what we mean when we're talking about affordable housing, except to say at various levels of affordability for various people at this point. This is a study. Very good. Now, I understand we have some representatives from the Rossi, Justo, and Guerra families potentially here today. Do you want to come up and say a few words? We'd love to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Mayor, I have one more person who I took the sign-in sheet to earlier.
Oh, I apologize,
That's
sure.
okay, just-
And if you could call the last person up for public testimony, we'll let them do it first. You can just cool your heels right there.
John Hollister.
Mr. Hollister, thank you, I apologize. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is John Hollister, and I have been accused lately of having a total lack of awareness of the housing inequities that exist in Portland. After our conversation, Madeline Kovacs from Portland for Everyone recommended I read the book titled The Color of Law. After reading only 35 pages, I was sick to my stomach. After finishing the book, I came away with outrage towards our past leaders, not just in Portland, but throughout the country, that caused and continue to perpetuate the most heinous of housing inequities. The Portland housing crisis has a number of serious issues, but in my mind, there is one tragedy that stands above them all: housing for people of color. There are several things that I became aware of from reading this book. FDR's awesome New Deal that I learned about in school, both employment and low-cost housing programs excluded African Americans. The Federal Housing Administration and Veterans Administration refused to insure home loans to African Americans. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and other major banks had the same policy. In December 1949, this practice was outlawed, but the law did not take effect until February 15th, 1950. Developers rushed to get their projects on record before the February deadline. Sounds very familiar. In the 1950s, cities across the nation increased minimum lot sizes to make affordable housing impossible. Also sounds very familiar. On page 238 of this book, the following quote: "What's important is that until we arouse in Americans the understanding of how we created a system of unconstitutional state-sponsored de jure segregation and a sense of outrage about it, neither remedies nor reparations will be on the public agenda." The Color of Law also debunks the theory that all housing is good housing. Oversupplying cities with market rate and luxury apartments continues to create even more segregated communities. In March 2014, Housing Commissioner Dan Salzman dedicated an additional $20 million to affordable housing to begin address the ongoing threat of displacement and gentrification. As much as I applaud this effort, it's simply not enough. How about in 2018, we add another $200 million to address this problem? How about we start on a much smaller scale, prohibit displacement of single moms of color? We are creating incredible instability for their children who move from school to school, spiraling deeper into fear, anger, and isolation. Give these women and their children a chance. They need affordability, family-size housing. I am just an old, empathetic white guy with average intelligence, and I can't possibly understand the black experience. But from this day forward, on this issue, you can consider me an awakened and outraged American. Together we can do better, much better.
So I would like to thank you, Mr. Hollister, for your testimony, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your testimony and the preparation that goes into your testimony. So I have been provided a color a Color of Law book, as have all of my colleagues. And I don't know if you can see this on the TV, but it is both tabbed and annotated with the appropriate sections with little dots. I will read that, and again, I can't even imagine how much time and energy you put into this, and I can feel your passion all the way up here, and I do appreciate it. Thank you. And your testimony is not only germane to these two ordinances, it is directly responsive to the conversation we're going to have with the Northeast Housing Oversight Report. So thank you for that testimony. Good morning. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Joe Rossi, one of the Rossi Justo Gary family members, and I brought a guest, Annette Stanhope, who is the president of the Park Rose Neighborhood Association. Also invited was Doug Cook. He's out of town and he sent his regrets he couldn't come and sit in. I just want to say I'm excited about this opportunity to begin a conversation with our community about master planning, what our farmlands could be. I think it's an amazing opportunity because 32 acres between a brand new park, thanks a lot to your work, Amanda. Our community loves it. It's well attended. Lewitt View Park is here, and Shaver School, primary school, middle school and high school, post office. So we have all the bones of what could be a really awesome walking community, and we're also just off the corridor, the Columbia Corridor. So I really vision this. As a property owner, we don't have the ability to begin a grand conversation of what these properties could be, developed to its highest use, and this process allows us that. I really see Corky Collier from the Corridor Association, and Annette and Doug, and then Mangus Mapes, who is our Historic Park Rose district manager, beginning a conversation of really what these properties could be. It's a clean slate. And it's very timely because these properties are owned by 6 people, but eventually with time, an apartment developer, somebody's going to come and they have an agenda. It's 50 units here. And what's best for the whole property and community is really not in their best interest. They just really need to rush development because time is money. But we have immigrant families who fled adversity and starvation in Italy from a few villages come and farm all these years. And thus, all this property has been undeveloped. And in the 1960s, apartment developers built a lot of product, and we have a lot of urban sprawl. And it passed over us because we were just humble farmers this whole time. And anyways, I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity. The conversation is what means the most to me with our neighbors, and it'll be a 1.5 years, probably 2-year process to see what this could do. But we were granted with the new zoning, some real flexible zoning. So whatever the need is in the community is really what the property owners would want, because that was what will make the project the most successful. And I also want everybody to know I'm available for any questions. I'll be following this process step by step. You'll have a volunteer person who will make sure that this is done right, because it's a legacy for our joint families and also Park Rose.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your working with the city staff and the community to make something really great for the community here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you had some comments as well.
I just wanted to say that the Park Rose Neighborhood Association is in support of this particular project, and we feel that having a methodical and intelligent investigation into the potential for this property will make sure that it will be used for the best use for the community.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Colleagues, any further discussion on this item or further questions? Very good. Carla, please call the roll first on item number 313.
Fish?
Well, this is very exciting, and I want to thank all the families that are driving this development plan, and thank Metro for this grant. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, yes, I also want to thank the Rossi, Justo, Gare families for their commitment to the Park Rose community, their commitment to the city of Portland to get it right here. This is a prime piece of property. As Joe Rossi just described, its proximity to a lot of things, probably most importantly, good jobs in the Columbia Corridor. So this is really ripe for some good, affordable housing, plus other things that are desired by the community of Park Rose. So I'm very happy to accept this grant. Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Well, it's very fitting and also exciting that the first project that's coming through under the new comprehensive plan is the Rossi Farms and coordinated development with your neighbours. For those of you who weren't here during the 4 years that we were doing the comprehensive plan, Joe Rossi was at every single hearing and consistently advocating for what's good for the community as well as what was good for the property owners. So I appreciate that. This could potentially create 850 housing units. So when we're talking, I'm sure there's other developers who are just waiting till the end of May to smack down their application for the new high-rise with fancy apartments or condominiums. This is going to be a mixed-use development that's going to truly develop 122nd Avenue, hopefully stimulate more transit on 122nd. There's already good transit on Sandy Boulevard. So this is going to help with a lot of different comprehensive plan matters. I'm particularly glad to see in the grant that there are stipends of $5,000 for the one or more of the following organizations: EPAP, the East Portland Action Plan, Community Alliance of Tenants, Immigrant Refugee Coalition, community organization. As Mr. Rossi reflected, it's going to take the whole community planning this, and including those who have been displaced from elsewhere a long time ago from Italy or recently from various other countries. This is a very vibrant community with a very high percentage of students at both Parkrose Middle School and Parkrose High School being low-income students and students of color. So I can't think of a better site to be doing this first project, and I'm really excited to see that the changes that we make in the planning realm are going to translate very quickly into on-the-ground improvements in this area. I was especially glad to see that the deliverable is that building permits will be cut within the first year after the end of the grant, and I think that's a worthy goal, which I hope we all work together. Thank you very much to all involved. Thanks to the Bureau of Planning. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thanks to Metro for selecting these important projects for grant funding. The partnership in our regional government is obviously an important part of successful planning. I'd also especially like to thank the families, the Rossis, the Justos, the Guerra families. I'd like to thank the Parkrose School District and the Neighborhood Association, and I'm pleased to see the chair here this morning speaking in support of these proposals, and all the other folks in the community who have worked hard to bring this to this stage today. I'd also like to thank the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty, Living Cully, Rose Community Development, Multnomah County, and others for their support of the, and I'm going to use the term, affordable housing in faith communities grant, because that is the name of the grant. But I was particularly pleased to hear the conversation that we had today around affordability and what it actually means and for whom. And that should be front and center as we go through with this development strategy. So like my colleagues, I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of these grant-funded projects. I vote aye, the ordinance is adopted. Please call 314.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I think this interfaith initiative has limitless opportunities. When you think about all the faith communities in the city of Portland and all of them who share a deep conviction around housing the poorest of the poor, and you think about all the big parking lots these churches have. They are well parked, most churches in the city of Portland. And there's a great opportunity here to have a mixed-use development supported by the faith community. And so I think this is a great grant, and I really look forward to seeing what the three opportunity sites that come forward first. And as I said, I think the potential is limitless here. Aye.
Udaley?
Got to get used to this new order.
I know, me too.
Well, similarly to the Rossi Farm development plan, it's heartening to see landowners, whether they're communities of faith or private landowners, being so intentional about how their property can be used to kind of its fullest potential, including serving existing communities and providing affordable housing. So this is really, really exciting. Aye.
Fritz?
I really like it when we have two ordinances we vote on in succession, because I can say what I forgot to say on the first one, and that is that we know that this land produces delicious fruits and vegetables. So when we do the concept plan, I hope you'll bear in mind a community garden would be really nice to have in there. Thank you. And I'm very excited about this second grant too, that we do need to be looking to faith communities, and they have been stepping up. This will provide some resources to do a very thoughtful evaluation of how three communities could help, which then can serve as a model for others. And government can't do it all. Government shouldn't do it all. Private people can't do it all by themselves. We need everybody to join together, and this is a really good way of doing this. I'm really happy to see that Metro is giving this grant also. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work on this. Next item, please, 315.
accept the North and Northeast Neighborhood Housing Strategy Oversight Committee 2017 report.
Colleagues, presented before us today will be the North-Northeast Housing Strategy Oversight Committee annual report. This is the third annual report on behalf of the North-Northeast Oversight Committee, and this report outlines the progress made in alignment with the 2014 North-Northeast Housing Strategy. This report also outlines some of the challenges that have been faced in accomplishing the goals of the strategy. Yet, this report is not business as usual, and I'm sure it's no secret to anybody in this chamber today that I was highly disappointed when I received this report. I believe that despite the good faith efforts of the city and our partners, and especially the Oversight Committee members themselves, we're way off the mark relative to the original promises around this strategy when it was first put forward over 3 years ago. Rather than coming in and having people 3 weeks ago talk about the problems, I actually wanted us to have a more frank conversation about the problems and the solutions and who could do what to get us back on track with regard to the original commitments around this project. So I requested then that it be removed from the council agenda and brought back after the Housing Bureau had had a chance to address the concerns that were raised in the report by the Oversight Committee and respond with some potential outlined solutions. I specifically requested that both the immediate and sustained actions were presented that deal with the challenges of both program participants as well as some challenges that we're seeing amongst the partner organizations. These challenges shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us here. We as Portlanders are aware of the history of North and Northeast Portland. We've seen how the city's actions over the last 40 years have led to the involuntary displacement of some of our most vulnerable historical residents in these neighborhoods, which is why this report and the work of the Portland Housing Bureau and the work of the Oversight Committee is so critically important. By continuing to support the use of the preference policy, and I want to be very clear, I am a strong supporter of the preference policy. It's been instrumental and important in prioritizing historically displaced families for rental and home ownership opportunities and continuing to assess and adjust how home ownership funds are made available to participants. We're going to continue down the path of fully implementing the North-Northeast Housing Strategy. To present the North-Northeast Neighborhood Strategy Oversight Committee annual report, we're joined today by the Oversight Committee Chair, Dr. Stephen Holt. Thank you, sir, for being here again. I think this is our 6th time together in less than a week. And committee member Dr. Lisa Bates, and of course we have Leslie here representing the Housing Bureau as well. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you. Commissioners, good to see you as well. Thank you, Mayor, for your thoughtful introduction. I think that helps to set the context of what is in front of each of you, and hopefully you've had a chance to look it over and think about it. What we're going to do is I want to spend some moments doing a brief and kind of high-level overview related to our work and the work that is so central to addressing such a marginalized and displaced people. And then we're going to kind of highlight what I'm going to call the challenges that surfaced during 2017, and Dr. Bates will speak to those. So I'm going to do the high-level overview, and then Dr. Bates will speak to the challenges we faced, and then I'll come back and make a few other comments. So today is briefly an overview. We'll talk about the charge, the engagement, what we've done around preventing displacement, creating new home ownership opportunities and rental units, and we'll talk about our preference policy. So the charge of the Oversight Committee, for those who may not know, is that the North-Northeast Portland Neighborhood Housing Strategy Community Oversight Committee is created and tasked with the responsibility of reviewing and monitoring the development and implementation of policies and programming associated with North-Northeast neighborhood housing or neighborhood housing opportunities and the dollars accompanying that activity. The scope of the Oversight Committee is to advise on, review program proposals and plan development, to monitor the implementation of policy and programming and associated outcomes, to advise the Housing Director and Housing Commissioner on progress, issues, concerns associated with the North-Northeast Housing Neighborhood and Interstate Urban Renewal TIF LIFT funds, and then that Portland Housing Bureau, and I would say along with the Housing Commissioner, would inform the Oversight Committee of decisions, plans, and proposals prior to implementation. The committee is made up of a variety of individuals who represent education, who represent economy, who represent finance, who represent banking, who represent community long-standing members. We have individuals from their 30s up to beyond 30, we'll say. It's comprised of people who've been very committed for a long time to the work of the city. I think we've got an excellent committee. Our meetings are held on a consistent basis so that as much as possible to provide an equitable opportunity for community members to be present. We meet the second Thursday of every odd month at New Song Community Church on Russell and MLK. And for those who cannot make it, then all meetings are recorded by Open Signal and can be found on Channel 30. Our goal is to make sure that people are accessing. It is important that this process be transparent, that it be accountable, that it be engaging, and that the community understands this is about fighting for the determinations and the decisions that were made in the original as a result of the original community engagement, the forums that were held. And you've heard me say it repeatedly over and over again that the promises that have been made have to be the promises that are kept. That's our focus. So here are some of the strategies that were put in place. Strategy number one was preventing displacement as it relates to home repair. And this map that you're looking at gives you an example or identifies all of the people who've received repair. The purple are grants and the blue are loans. And that's within the Interstate Urban Renewal area. Oh, in the study area. Thank you very much. Another strategy that was talked about is the ADU or accessory dwelling unit program. We had significant concerns as an oversight committee related to some of the implications around the ADU program, and at this point think it needs some more baking, some thorough thinking through all of the impacts. There are so many various elements that are connected to the ADU program, and I'd be more than happy to elaborate around that if there are questions.
Yeah, could you give us a couple of examples? Yeah.
Okay. At the time when it was talked about, the discussion was in regard to the accessory dwelling units being in basements. And so not looking at the possibility of using garages. And so how then would that impact a homeowner if they're going to have to open up their basement to others? How does that impact in terms of that homeowner now becoming a business owner and the education associated with that? What are the tax implications that are associated with that? And so there were just some, and other elements I could continue to elaborate on, but there were just some questions that came up that we thought needed to be more thoroughly investigated and considered before we could say yes or no related to that. And then, you know, is it a wealth creation strategy? Is it what's the purpose behind it? Another strategy that is a part of our oversight is the creation of new homes. In regard to that, as you know, the Interstate Urban Renewal area is a hot market. Home prices are increasing significantly on a regular basis until we've thought it necessary to change the boundary, to extend the boundary area to the study area to give a greater opportunity for people who have been impacted to have an opportunity to purchase homes. We also increased the subsidy from what was originally $65,000 that became $80,000 that now is $100,000 to support and help people to secure homes. And then we also increased the subsidy for development of new units from $100,000 to $125,000. Strategy number 3 as it relates to creating rental homes. This gives you an idea of the projects that are happening, who the project sponsors are, where it is located, and the number of units associated with each project. And I won't talk through each of those, but it's over 500 units. Now, on top of all of that work, and Mayor, you just spoke to it, is the preference policy. Everything that's happening in terms of how dollars are being allocated and spent are being filtered through a preference policy. The main concept behind the preference policy is to give opportunity to the families who were once in North and Northeast Portland, who've been displaced and or gentrified, to give them an opportunity of preference associated with their geography to return. Now, I'd love for it to be just the families who were impacted, you get a chance to come back. We know that HUD would overturn that. We understand that our federal government would not back it. And so the policy then has been established to be supported. It is the only policy that has been supported, and we're super excited about that. That the heartbeat around helping the families who've been impacted, they at least have a way to be supported to take advantage of the opportunities of returning. On the next slide, here's an example of how the policy is being implemented or how it's being, the impact that it's having. So on the home ownership, on the first round, that's the green box on your left side. The Collaborative, which is the African American Alliance of Home Ownership, which involves Proud Ground, involves Habitat for Humanity, and a few other nonprofits who are part of that. You see the available slots, the amount of people who are referred, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other slot is PCRI. On the right-hand side, which you have are rental units, and specifically Garlington Place, which has 31 units. There were 736 applicants for 31 units. Of those applicants, 15 could identify eminent domain. I think it speaks to the fact for part of the conversation that's happened is, do people want to move back? Here's an example. Yes, they did.
So by that you mean people who were evicted because of eminent domain?
People who were impacted, absolutely, yeah. And so 15 could prove eminent domain. And then down below you see a chart of the ethnicity of those who responded. It's a little hard to see. So this is the work that the Oversight Committee is engaged with. Again, we could drill down into specifics and particulars, but I believe we can each read, and I don't want to insult us with that. I do want to identify, though, that while the work is vital and necessary, and I don't remember the gentleman's name who came before and handed out the book.
John Hollister.
John Hollister. I couldn't have paid him to do a better job of setting up the reality of the weight of this work. So in light of that, there are things we're concerned about. We're concerned that, again, the promises made are promises kept, and we want to highlight some of those. And Dr. Bates, if you will speak to.
Sure. Thank you so much. And let me just take a moment to say thank you for the opportunity to be part of this committee on this important work. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for appointing me to this committee, and I've continued under Mayor Wheeler. And particularly thank you to folks here in the Black community. I'm not from Portland, and people have entrusted me to be part of this group of people who are holding this, very deeply valued space and this history and families' really lives as we go forward, and I take that very seriously. It's really critical with this engagement that we continue in our practices, I think, around transparency, openness, and access to information about this set of programs. Certainly to ensure that folks have the right expectations and understandings of things like timelines for construction, when they can anticipate seeing units on the ground, because it has been a couple of years. We feel that it's very critical to have a deep community engagement around budgeting out the remainder of the TIF funds as the ICURA comes to an end. Where are we going next in the big picture with these funds? We also have, our oversight committee has representation on the Hill Block Site Project Working Group. And I believe I can speak for everyone in our oversight committee in saying that we think that's a very critical moment to not only value community history, but to make sure that Black Portlanders are emplaced in Northeast Portland with opportunities for economic development as well as housing. And that we're really insistent on carrying those principles forward into the Broadway corridor, the post office site, and the Rose Quarter, both sites of African American history and displacement caused by policies in this community. To speak a bit to our assessment around the preference policy and the specific housing programming. As Bishop Holt mentioned, as Mayor Wheeler mentioned, the preference policy is really an innovative new practice. It's an opportunity. It's being talked about nationally. It's being talked about internationally as an opportunity to think about how to repair displacement, particularly that has been driven by public policy. And of course, it's been well publicized here as well by the Housing Bureau's efforts, and therefore it needs to be on point. In our rental projects, we again want to make sure we're communicating timelines and opportunities so that folks are understanding when they will be able to access these possible opportunities. But we also have concerns about changes to some projects that seem to be in the pipeline, for example, around reducing bedroom size to 0 and 1 bedrooms. We are building affordable housing for the very long term here. Housing is a very durable good, and we want to ensure that it accommodates families today and will continue to be part of that crucial infrastructure for family housing into the future with additional bedroom sizes. On the homeownership side, as we know, there have been more significant challenges in that program. We have, I think, diverse opinions on the Oversight Committee about the models and tools that can be used, but we all agree that homeownership is a really critical response for the African American families whose exclusion from access to this opportunity is at the root of wealth gap, of housing instability, and is very deeply, deeply connected to the spirit of fair housing and civil rights. This is the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, as well as a deeply meaningful anniversary around the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we see access to home ownership for Black families as deeply tied to that cause and that movement. And we, therefore, are deeply concerned about the lack of progress in this area. First, a sort of limited targeting of home repair for maintaining homeownership for African American homeowners who do remain in the community. Second, that there have been very, very few successful buyers. There has been quite a bit of confused and delayed reporting on progress and the specific challenges that are happening in organizations and for families, and sort of a lack of real clear solution strategies being offered in that communication. We have continued to press the point that down payment assistance loans ought to be forgiven over time in order to give people the best chance for maintaining their homes and building home equity. And finally, we want to ensure additional oversight in the relationship and communications between partners and families to make sure that people who are accessing this opportunity are being treated with great dignity and are being responded to in a timely manner and are having the best possible experience in what can often be a stressful but is also a very exciting moment and opportunity. So we've been talking through those challenges over the last few Oversight Committee meetings. We've heard some responses from the Housing Bureau. I think we're very eager to hear about the particulars of how those programs will be either modified or how we'll go forward with sort of new formats working toward the same vision.
Thank you, Dr. Bates.
Thanks, Dr. Bates.
So our commitment is to resolve each issue. That's what we'd like to see happen. Our desire is that there's strategic, intentional, purposeful, and expeditious implementation that's helping families get from one place to another. The hope is one thing, and hope is great. But to take a moment and to step into a little different zone that I function from, Proverbs 13, chapter 12, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And the idea of sick is that it makes you spin in a circle downward. So to live in hope is great, but hope must be fulfilled. And that's what we want to see happen. Those are our concerns. And we're looking forward to how we strategically implement the answers. I want to say thanks to Dr. Bates for your involvement and engagement, your thoughtful work. Thank you to Sheila Holden, who's a member of our Oversight Committee, for being here this morning. Again, we're made up of a significantly talented and committed group of people who really want to see the things we've said come to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you so much for your work. Are there specific things that you need from the city in order to take this work forward?
I think part of, well, there are two specific things that I'd like to see happen, and Dr. Bates alluded to one, and I'll let you respond as well. The first one is the helping us to engage with the necessary partners, all of the players, from the Portland Housing Bureau to the nonprofit partners, to make sure that we are connecting in a manner that is moving forward. Our goal is not to throw anyone under the bus. That's not the effort. The effort is to make sure that people have what they need, that we're having the authentic conversations, we're dealing with the real issues, whoever's responsible for whatever delays in any areas, if that's permitting, if that's, we don't know, but that's where the city can weigh in. I think that's one of the areas where the city can weigh in. The other area, and it's not specifically in this report, but obviously we need more funding. We need more dollars. It would be great to really think about strategic ways to leverage private funding, to leverage foundation funding and or other resources to really address what is significant. As you know, Portland is the most gentrified city in the nation. And so if we're going to do something about this, I think it's time for us to really ramp up our effort and take it on to address it. So thank you for asking.
Thank you. Dr. Bates.
If I could add to that, I pushed hard in Salem for the passage or the referral of a constitutional amendment to the voters. And that constitutional amendment would allow us to take housing dollars and leverage them with private sector dollars for exactly this kind of a purpose. And while I can't sit here today and advocate one way or the other, I will just say I pushed really hard for it, and it's a really important tool that we don't currently have. So I hope people give it a good, hard look when the voters pamphlet comes their way on this particular issue. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I'd like Dr.
Fritz?
Bates to give her input into what else can the city and the council as individuals or a whole, what can we do to help?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about resources, and certainly resources are very critical. I think, you know, outside of these kind of programmatic fixes that we've been talking about, I think just being very clear about what the work is that's happening here, what the strategies are that are critical. This is costly work because Northeast Portland is an expensive part of town. And to not, but yet we can't let that go. We can't let it go because of the historical racial exclusion and segregation that's happened in the city, but we also can't let it go because it's not a good idea to allow large portions of our city to be simply inaccessible to people who are not greatly wealthy. It's not a good infrastructure for health and resilience, I don't believe, in a community. So I think just to be very clear in our conversations about this larger affordable housing topic, which we've been talking about this morning, that this work in a gentrified neighborhood is vital.
And thank you. My last question is, I was at the Parks Board yesterday where Rakaya Adams and Zari Santner did a presentation on the Albina project, and I wondered how much overlap there is between your committee's work and their planning, and other things that we need to be aware of that we're thinking of now that would either help or burden or continue to burden the Albina community.
Do you want to respond first?
I mean, it's a marvelous plan, isn't it? The Albina vision. I would say that I think that speaks to my comment that our group and the folks in the community who come routinely to our meetings very much understand the history of the full Albina area down to the Rose Quarter. That was also a site of Black homes, of Black businesses that were demolished for the Coliseum, that were demolished for a freeway. It's not unique to Portland. It's happened in every city in America, but we may have some unique opportunities to do something about it and to have a very dynamic plan and people behind it. It's time, it should be taken very seriously and seen as a connection and a continuation of this project.
So either directly and or indirectly, we have levels of crossover. If it is the Community Development Initiatives Oversight Committee of Prosper Portland, or now the Hill Block work that the city, Prosper Portland Legacy, is involved in, the Albina Plan or the Albina Vision or the Broadway Corridor, you name it, there is this overlap, because the reality is we're defining geography by streets. That isn't how it plays out in real life, right? It isn't that if I live in the Broadway corridor, I don't go to this place or that place. So it's incumbent upon us to take an aggressive or an assertive role to make sure we're having conversations. And either our oversight committee has representation in these various groups, or I'm engaged in communication with the various groups, because the decisions that are for the best practice and the best opportunity, it's intelligent of us to think together and strategize together to see how we can supplement, complement, support the work. So there's a real continuity and hopefully even a continuity of design and look and structure and feel and function and flow. So that's a great question. We are doing our part. I think that supporting from your side, commissioners can help us to make that successful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Oh, Commissioner Udaley, sure.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the presentation. I can dig these numbers up later, but I think it might be useful for the purpose of this conversation to get a sense of how many individuals or households had we hoped to have served by this point in the process, and how many have been served. Whether I know homeownership, it's 4, which is quite low,
and
but there's
the
also
hope
rental.
was for 65 homeowners.
Okay.
At this point, we officially now have 5. Yeah.
And then on the rental side, did we have numbers or?
Oh gosh, I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Fine.
They're in the.
So the couple areas that I'm particularly interested in is the home repair loans. As Commissioner of BDS, we are bringing back our Get Legal program, where we're going to be working with property owners to address code violations and get their properties safe and habitable. Is this a staffing capacity issue as far as the low number of dollars that went out the door? Because I've seen families having to crowdfund on the internet to do, elderly homeowners to do essential repairs to keep their homes or to refinance their homes. And we've also looked at maps of liens, and we unsurprisingly see a significant number of liens in rapidly gentrifying areas, and those liens are typically going to be on older, lower income homeowners.
Yes.
So we're really committed to making sure that we're not driving displacement through BDS, but those home loans would sure help in our mission. So
I appreciate you asking the question, what brought us to this? How did we have that in terms of our report? Why were the numbers as they are? I think that a good response to that will be from the Portland Housing Bureau to be able to answer the specifics as to why, and then how do we adjust that going forward. And I'm extremely pleased to hear that it is something that matters and that you're thinking through how to best serve these longstanding members, right? I mean, we're talking about a neighborhood, pardon me for a second, we're talking about a neighborhood that's been absolutely decimated. Economic opportunities wiped, families and relationships separated, and I don't think we can be casual about this. I think we need to be intentional and passionate as it relates to this work, so.
And aggressive on the timeline.
Yeah.
Another option, Dr. Bates.
Likewise, I think it's wonderful to hear that this program, the Get Legal program, would be sort of resurrected, and that you are having an equity lens in mind in doing so. I know you have a wonderful equity manager at BDS. I cannot emphasize enough the engagement with families who are long-standing owners in Northeast Portland who may have significant home repair needs, liens, and have had unpleasant interactions with the bureaucracy around code violations. Will take some very deep work to consider how to engage effectively with those families. The trust issues, the understanding issues about what will lead someone into an enforcement path versus a remediation path. Communication, I mean, you cannot make communication clear enough. And sort of engaging with some trusted organizations, I would suggest, and folks who can sort of guide and help to communicate that will be very critical.
I appreciate that. Another item I just want to bring up, and we don't have to really delve into it, but I haven't really heard it discussed in the context of this strategy, is could we or should we be working to preserve succession of ownership within families? I have now witnessed two of my African-American neighbors, one in Irvington and one in Woodlawn, lose homes that were inherited, that were at some point paid in full through what I think is unnecessary and heartbreaking foreclosure process. So I'm very interested in what we could be doing, because it's complicated. You have maybe, one surviving parent leaves a home that has appreciated massively in value to multiple children. None of them may have the resources to buy the home. It's just, and they end up losing this asset. And I've never owned a home. It makes me sick to think that someone, could lose something that valuable. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then, point of clarity, have we been allowing people to look outside the interstate URA so far, or we're going to allow them to look outside the interstate URA for the home ownership opportunities?
We made that adjustment and expanded the boundary, and so that is something we are recommending to be approved. That hasn't been implemented. Is that correct?
So let me just clarify. When we initially did the RFP, Leslie Goodlow from the Housing Bureau, for the $5 million for home ownership, we limited it to a study area within the URA, so that we could not use the funds in the entire URA. And the committee recommended, and it was approved for us to be able to use those down payment assistance loans throughout the whole URA, not just within the study area, because we were finding that the study area was the most expensive. And so folks were having a difficult time to buy a house and use the down payment assistance just because the prices, and folks had cash. So North Portland had many more homes available within a price point that folks could use the down payment assistance.
That happened when?
We voted on that this year.
And then the last thing I'll put out there is I have a particular interest in ADUs and how we can make that opportunity accessible to as many homeowners as possible. So when that conversation comes back around, especially once the residential infill project policies are implemented, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Perfect.
Because I'm really excited about the potential, but I'm concerned that it's only going to be available to relatively affluent homeowners if we don't make some big stuff happen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Holt, Dr. Bates, Sheila Holden, and others for serving on and leading from day one, the Northeast Housing Strategy Oversight Committee. I think when we first, back in 2014, when I directed the Housing Bureau to come up with a preference policy and directed my housing advisor, Shannon Callahan, to make that happen, Dr. Holt, you were there from the inception. I think, it's hard work. I mean, it's fraught with peril in terms of legal definitions that can do it. And it's taken some intentionality to even get to where we are right now, and there's still a long ways to go. But I think your oversight, as you said, holding our feet to the fire has really been successful. I mean, we have a long way to go, but at least now I think the preference policy is known by people who have been displaced, witnessing by 736 applicants for the Garlington Place apartments. That's a lot of people knowing about the preference policy being there. So that's a start. That's a crucial start. People need knowledge of it. And I think when we first announced it and implemented it, it was sort of dismissed by many in the community, I think, as tokenism. And, you could probably look at it right now and still say it's tokenism, but I think we're on a path. And we're only going to succeed on that path with your continued oversight to make sure that we, the city and the Housing Bureau, get this right, because it is so important. And it's such an important part of our history of Portland, as John Hollister so well articulated earlier today. This is something that we need to be very intentional to overcome. And so I just want to say, we got to work ahead of us, but I think we're up for the challenge.
So let me jump in for a sec. I want to join in thanking the committee for their excellent work. But let's be clear, the committee is an oversight committee. You are not charged with building the housing. You're not charged with working through the regulatory problems. You are not charged with going out and collecting the money. You're charged with providing oversight on a program. And I don't remember the last time we had a report come to council that documented so many failures in a program that you are trying to oversee, and processes and other lapses that are making it very difficult for you to do your job. Now, you have been very diplomatic in your presentation to council, but the mayor began by saying how disappointed he was in this report, and I've just taken sort of the highlights of some things you put in here. Yeah. As I read this report, there is a lack of clarity on some of the policy questions. And I'd hate to see us come back a year from now and continue to have a lack of clarity on policy questions. I mean, that's something that we've asked you to weigh in on, and we need to call the question on a couple of things. One of them is accessory dwelling units. Two is the scope of the REACH project, and has it changed beyond what was anticipated? Three is some other very thoughtful suggestions you put in here. There's questions for me around staff capacity and communication. There's questions about, have we given you and the staff enough flexibility to adapt in real time to things? Because you shouldn't have to come back to council every few weeks for a change in whatever. There should be an ability to adapt to change circumstances. You've had turnover on your committee, and you're a 10-person committee, but in the last year you brought 3 new people on. That's disruptive by definition. The economic circumstances on the ground have changed dramatically. We've been hearing from the development community that costs are going through the roof, that we're at 150 to 200% capacity in the building trades. We're bidding up the price of construction materials, of labor, of land. So as you said, Dr. Holt, money is a big issue, because what was envisioned in 2014 is now much more expensive to accomplish for the very same plan that was put on the table. I could go on and on, but I think you've done a laudable job in presenting all of the challenges that you're facing.
Thank you.
And what I want to avoid is coming back next year and reading a report that says we still have those challenges. And when you were asked by 2 colleagues, essentially what I think is the most important question, what has to change? What do you need to be successful? You mentioned communication and you mentioned resources. I want to ask you to be even bolder in coming back to us with suggestions. For example, we're in the middle of a budget process. Does the Housing Bureau have to hire another person to oversee this project? Because last time I checked, over the last 10 years, we keep asking the Housing Bureau to do more and more things, including producing reports and overseeing projects. But if you look at their staff, it has remained pretty static. It may even be on a downward arc. So there's a limit to what they can do with existing resources. And I have great confidence in the people at the Housing Bureau. But one of the things that you may be highlighting is we need another project manager.
Yeah.
That may be something specifically that you want to put on the table, and that's something we should take up at budget time. There may be you may need someone who is helping you close on certain issues. There's a whole host of issues in here that are still drifting, and you're struggling with it. Well, for God's sake, we don't want you to spend 10 more meetings over the next year just moving the ball a foot. We want you to be empowered to call the question, and as long as it's within the scope of your authority, have confidence that the Housing Bureau can implement it. So, and one other thing, Dr. Holt, you alluded to some of the frustrations that the committee felt around the progress of some of the developments. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's almost impossible to discern based on the data we've been given is what is actually the biggest obstacle or set of obstacles. Now, in our regular deliberations, when we do complicated things like technology oversight, we get a color-coded chart that tells us in each of the categories whether we're on track or we're failing, and then it helps explain it. It's in red, yellow, and green. And you know what? For those of us who are very, very busy up here, red, yellow, and green is an extremely useful exercise, because then we get to say, why is this still red? And if it turns out there's a backlog at the Bureau of Development Services, or there isn't enough financing, or there's some other problem, then we can be partners in helping to solve that. But right now, the data doesn't actually, the report doesn't actually give us a lot of detail on what are the roadblocks. And I share your frustration. And you want to know what those roadblocks are, and you also want to have someone accountable to clearing those roadblocks. So, a couple suggestions. Number one, I hope within the next 30 days, if you have additional suggestions for what you need, what's on your wish list, that the committee will submit it to each of us, to the entire council.
Perfect.
And that includes whether you believe there has to be anything included in the budget that we are now crafting to help move this thing along. Number two, I would love your suggestions for how we can be more transparent about what are the obstacles in the way of some of the production goals that you've established. You've set audacious goals. We all understand that the market has changed. We understand they were low confidence goals, but what we don't know is which part of the equation is getting in your way. And I would encourage the Housing Bureau to come up with a chart using and I see Director Callahan shaking her head, yes, a chart that literally has the red, yellow, green coding so we can all understand with you what's the hang-up. And if it's a hang-up that one of us is responsible for in our leadership overseeing a bureau, then you can legitimately reach out to us and say, fix that. If it's a problem in the marketplace because the costs are becoming prohibitive and it comes back to you need more resources, that's a conversation we should have. But as I look at this report, I'm not entirely clear about what those headwinds are, but I think all of us up here want to be part of the solution. And again, I want to go back to a fundamental point. You're an oversight body. You're not the body we designated to sort of deliver the product. So you are giving us a sober report that says we're making a little bit of progress, but we're not making the progress that you'd like to see. And I think we need a little more information about what it is that needs to change for us to see more progress. I know we're all going to be very polite about this conversation, and we're all very diplomatic, but the report is actually pretty detailed in areas that I can feel the frustration in the report. And I hope you'll see us as your partners in fixing those problems so that when we come back next year, we can celebrate, even more progress towards the goals that you've established. And if problems have come up along the way, we don't have to have elaborately bureaucratic, complicated mechanisms to make sure you get the resources and tools you need. There should be enough flexibility built into this.
Appreciate that.
And then finally, just to the conversation that you had with one of my colleagues about the new Albina vision. I've been on the council for 10 years. And somewhere in this building, there is a closet that has all the visions for the Albina district and for the Rose Quarter. And probably there's some plants that have already rooted in the dust that has settled because they just stack up. Each one was well-intentioned. Each one at some point had a constituency. And 10 years later, we've actually done nothing in the Rose Quarter. Now, Rakaya and a group of well-intentioned people have come in with a bold vision that connects Albina, connects the Rose Quarter to historic Albina, connects the community to the river, does some justice work that's very important. And just speaking for myself, I've concluded that the only way that vision is going to see the light of day is if we create a separate public authority to drive that vision. I think it is beyond the capacity of Prosper Portland to handle that, and I think for historic reasons it would be a mistake to ask them to drive that vision. I think the council in the next year has to decide whether we are going to be bold and establish a public authority. In big cities across the country, public authorities have driven big visions. And this one I don't think will happen unless we create a separate public authority with a different governance structure that allows this vision to move forward. So that's just one commissioner's view on that question. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If I could just say two things. We have no reticence being very specific around what our concerns are and or what we think could be solutions. You echo very clearly the frustration, and what we've been trying to discern and uncover or discover is where are the roadblocks, who is responsible for those roadblocks, hence what you see in the report. So, and I think you'll get some of those answers in a moment with some of the strategies. And then lastly, I echo and agree that if we're going to move this needle forward, it's going to take some aggressive action to do so. What time is causing is more delay and more displacement if we don't do some things differently. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Leslie, did you have anything to add? If not, I want to bring the interim housing director forward.
Nope, I'm just here to support them and answer questions they couldn't answer, so Shannon wanted me to stay when she comes up.
Why don't you hang out? Thank you both very much. Again, thank you for your leadership. Dr. Bates, thank you as well. Sheila, thank you for continuing this. So Commissioner Fish spoke eloquently, and both of the bureaus he mentioned are mine. The buck stops with me on both the Housing Bureau and it stops with me on Prosper Portland with regard to the development of the Rose Quarter. And I want to be crystal clear. There will not be another report like the one you just saw. This was created 3 years ago. In 3 years, 5 families have found housing through this program. In that regard, I don't see how I can sit here with a straight face and call it anything other than an abject failure. And I agree with you, Commissioner, that it is not the failure of the Oversight Committee. It is our failure that after now 3 reports, we have very little progress to show for it. There will not be a 4th report like this because I'm going to hold everybody accountable for ensuring that we see good progress. Just as a side note with regard to the Rose Quarter, I want you to know that the conversation is already underway and there already is a consideration of an authority model to direct or at least help direct the development of the Rose Quarter. We have many other master planning exercises that we're undertaking, including the Broadway Corridor and other projects throughout the city. I share your concern about capacity, and I will make sure that as we make decisions around that, we will include the council and the public in those conversations. They are in a stage that I would describe as early. So, interim director, first of all, I want to set the stage. You and I have had many conversations with Dr. Holt and others about this report since I first received a copy of it. I want to be crystal clear on the record. You have demonstrated to me beyond any doubt a strong commitment to making sure that this project goes forward and that it is successful. You have articulated to me your understanding that the rest of the country and others are watching our results on this project. Therefore, it is imperative that we be successful with this project. And I want to just make note of the fact, as Commissioner Saltzman did earlier, you were his point person on this project when you worked for Commissioner Saltzman. So you're not new to this game. The first issue that was mentioned was the delays in families becoming homeowners and slow production of homeownership units. What commitments can you make to us today?
First of all, I'd like to let you know that, as you have said, Mayor, that I and we at the Housing Bureau are committed to getting this back on track. And as Dr. Holt alluded to, there's been some questions and concerns about who's responsible. We are. it's the Housing Bureau that's ultimately responsible. So I just want to let you know that, and that I clearly take that role very seriously, and so do all of my staff. In terms of home ownership, we made a commitment to 65 families and moving them into home ownership. We have chosen 2 different providers, a collaborative and PCRI, to provide
I'm sorry,
a mix
what collaborative?
African American Alliance for Home Ownership Collaborative, with that includes Proud Ground, NAYA, and Habitat for Humanity. And then we also have PCRI, who is building 22 homes.
And Hacienda is part of that as well?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. One of the things that we are concerned about is that we have 2 different partnerships, 2 different lists, and we want to make sure that we are examining ourselves, the Bureau, the status of every single preference policy household in the pipeline to see if there is anything that we can do to move those families quicker. That means new strategies, new tools. For us, that also means talking to the developers that receive the homeownership tax exemption program about possibly acquiring those houses sooner. It means providing regular and clear and consistent quarterly reporting of the type that you indicated, Commissioner Fish, regarding not just the development process, but where all of these families are, what are any of the concerns that we have, what can we do.
And who will that information be provided to, and when will it be provided, how often?
It'll be provided on a quarterly basis, publicly, and to the Oversight Committee. Thank you. I did want to say that we have been, and I was in contact last week with Director Esau from BDS and requested assistance from her with priority permitting for the homeownership units and process, and she was very amenable to that, and I appreciate that help in advance. I think it's going to be important that we do have a city effort to keep on track. That was homeownership, my response to homeownership. Mayor, did you want me to provide?
There's one more thing I would like. Can you make any commitments today numerically around homeownership units created or loans proffered? Are we in a position to do that yet?
I am not. I am not.
When will we be?
I will be ready to do that next month with the Oversight Committee at the May meeting. As I've said, we have staff right now looking at the files of everyone in the preference policy list to ensure where we are. The development of the units are not projected until later in 2018 and 19 by our partners, but we want to make sure those units stay on track and the families are matched up.
Good. I find nothing motivates a coalition more than concrete goals to which we will all be held accountable.
We will set those goals with
Good.
the Oversight Committee in May.
Good. Do that and add 10%. With regard to the loan assistance structure, Dr. Bates had suggested a modification of that structure. What say you?
We agree. We wholeheartedly agree with the recommendation of the Oversight Committee. We believe that a family that has resided in their home for a period of 30 years should have the down payment assistance completely forgiven. We're recommending a structure that starts with forgiveness at year 15. We'll be bringing that specific proposal to both the Northeast Oversight Committee in May and our Portland Housing Advisory Commission, as we would intend to make that a program change available citywide, and then we would bring that back to City Council for your approval.
Very good. Commissioner Udaley had articulated a potential strategy around standards in rental units, and I want you to know, Commissioner, that's well received over here. Thank you for that. There was also some questions about the loans or the outcomes for home repair loans. We are in the budget process, as Commissioner Fish rightly pointed out. Where do you stand on that?
So there are 2 different products that are offered to homeowners in the URAs, one of which is a home repair loan, and one is a home repair grant. The grants are smaller dollar amounts, usually around $10,000, that are particular to access issues or issues with seniors remaining in their homes, or disability ramps, things of that type. We do not have a problem with getting those dollars out the door through our partners. We have had a dip in the numbers of families of communities of color that received that program last year. We know that we have proven methods that have given us better outcomes in the past that we did not use last year. We will be reinstituting those and talking with the committee because we do have proven ways. With the home repair loan program, which is usually about a $50,000 loan, these are much more significant, obviously, repairs to homes. We have staff that is capable of doing about 50 of those each year, and we have 3 of those staff. We anticipate doing and are on track to do 50 loans for next year. Quite frankly, we over budgeted. And that's what the committee is seeing, is we over budgeted to a level that we are not capable of reaching outcomes, and it was, quite frankly, a budget mistake on our part. And we have rectified that.
Okay, and that will be rectified. It is rectified through the Bureau's requested budget?
Yes.
Very good. With regard to the Argyle development at Reach,
yes.
This has been a very complicated project. As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of that has to do with changing market forces over the last couple of years. Construction costs have gone up. There is a gap that is formed as a result in part of market forces and part of federal policy. What are we going to do over the course of the next year to get that project moving?
So what we have is the REACH has submitted an application to the state for gap funding. If that is successful, I think we have a project that is capable of moving forward on a quick timeline. Though the Oversight Committee has raised concerns about the number of family size units and overall design of that project. But I think that's a much simpler conversation if we have a gap already identified and filled. If they are not successful in their application, we have asked them to present a balanced budget with the amount of money that they were awarded in the NOFA. That would likely result in a significant decrease in numbers, and we would be proposing to bring those options back to the Oversight Committee. Our first goal would, of course, be to get this program moving, but sometimes you also must make tough choices about not proceeding with the program if the gap is too large.
Right, and the hard work here is going to be to reach a consensus agreement that is probably going to be different than the original vision based on changes in the market. And the key here is we need to engage with the committee and find out where that pragmatic compromise is that gets this project moving.
Yes.
Great. Anything else, colleagues? Commissioner
Mayor,
Fish. Yes, sir.
Director Callahan, I met yesterday with the home builders, and I learned some interesting things. They explained to me some of the challenges they're facing in this market right now. Rising interest rates. I think the Fed has increased rates twice and a signal they could go higher, so their interest rate environment's changed. Cost of land is going up, affecting the cost of projects. Cost of construction, both in terms of materials and labor, has gone up dramatically, in part because there's so many projects going on right now bidding up the cost that people are getting bids from construction companies. They're well above what we saw 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
And there's frankly some concern that we're going to have we're going to go into a cyclical shift in the marketplace, because after all, housing is not immune from cycles, and that we may be, just beginning in a kind of a slight turn down. So there's a lot of factors that they're weighing in terms of their work. That's one of the reason I mention that is that I think uniquely this is an area where we have to have an asterisk next to our goals and say they are low to medium confidence goals, because frankly, as smart as you are and as capable as you are, you can't control the macro market forces that are affecting all of these projects, that are affecting individual consumer decision making and the like. So I think I like the idea of resetting the numbers so that they are achievable. Mm-hmm. But since we in generally talk about low, medium, and high confidence, I think we have to be clear with people that we're talking low to medium confidence, because we're not smarter. We can't anticipate all the market headwinds that we're going to be dealing with. And we should be clear to people about that. In the next report we get, is it possible that we could get it color-coded so that, for example, on the projects in the pipeline, we could see, for example, is it on time? Is it on budget? If it's not on budget, what are the factors that are driving cost overruns? Is there a regulatory hurdle that is slowing things down? I think we could come up with, 3 or 4 generic categories and then color code them. Is that something that you think you can do?
I'd be, yes, Commissioner, we'd be committed to that, and as well doing that on a quarterly basis. And we'll be, if you're interested, we'll also provide it to your offices as we do to the Oversight Committee.
I would appreciate that. It also makes it easier for us to then ask the questions, as we do with technology oversight and a number of other areas. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Very good. Kids, where are you from? Where? Buckman. Excellent. Thanks for coming to City Hall. We appreciate it today. Thank you. Colleagues, I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the report.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Saltzman to accept the annual report from the Northeast Housing Oversight Committee. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Just 3 closing observations. First, Mayor, thank you for your leadership. You began this hearing by very clearly stating that you intend to provide leadership and oversight over this process, that you're not satisfied with the progress we're making. And I think it's frankly refreshing when people in leadership positions take ownership. 2, I think we owe a great debt to the Oversight Committee. But again, it's an oversight committee. They're not out there, surveying the land and putting up siding and negotiating with banks. They are reviewing our progress. And this report is, I don't think I've read a report quite like this in some time. So thank you for the care that went into it, and thank you for your candor about the challenges that you see, and your appeal to this body and others to help you get it right. And then finally, I just want to go back to the underlying issue here, something Commissioner Saltzman launched and the council has backed. I'm proud to be on a council that has a Northeast Portland housing strategy and has worked through some very challenging legal issues. We are about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. It's not entirely clear there'll be a celebration at HUD, but we will be celebrating. And we all have a big stake in the success of this endeavor. Dr. Holt, you made that clear too. So we owe you our best in making sure that you can achieve the goals that we've set out. So thank you for your service, and thank you for an excellent report. And I have tremendous confidence in Director Callahan and her team that they'll get it right. Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, just thanks again to the Oversight Committee for your service, and particularly Dr. Holt for your leadership from day one and your steadfast leadership. So thank you very much. Aye.
Udaley.
Well, thank you to the Oversight Committee. The strategy is innovative and it's exciting. Clearly, we've had some trouble getting out of the gate, but I'm still excited and hopeful. Thank you for that quote. Actually, I needed to hear that today. That we'll move forward more successfully very soon. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, Dr. Bates, Sheila Holden, who are here from the committee, and for the other members of the committee for the enormous amount of time that you've put in doing true community engagement. And I appreciate all of the strategies that you're using to allow people to participate in this discussion, which is about them. And I appreciate the candor in your report. Obviously, we need to do better, and we need to do more. And I see you as more than an oversight committee. You've been driving the policy on this since the beginning, and I hope you will continue to do that. I hope you will continue to hold the city accountable by creating these reports and coming to tell us about them. And yet, I still appreciate how thoughtful you are in the way that you make your recommendations that we can and must do better. Thank you very much for that too. Aye.
Wheeler.
Life is short. And this is a committee that expects action, and so do I. Thank you, Dr. Holt, for your leadership on this and frankly, many other things where you provide leadership and guidance and counsel to the City Council and to me in particular. Dr. Bates, thank you. I always appreciate your frankness and your integrity and your hard work. Sheila Holden, thank you for being engaged over many years on many different projects, including this. Thanks for being here. To all members of the Oversight Committee. It's one thing to hold people accountable. It's another to inspire them to do the right thing. And you do both really well. So thanks for that. Let's get on it. I vote aye. The report's accepted. Thank you. Next item, please. 316.
Appeal on behalf of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association against Design Commission's decision of approval for design review with modifications and concurrent Greenway review for the Fremont Apartments, a 17-story mixed-use building at 1650 Northwest Parkway, LU 16278-621, DZMGW.
Colleagues, just a reminder, we're back into and on the record hearing. Do any council members have ex parte contacts or information gathered since the last hearing to disclose?
Mayor, I'll start.
Commissioner Fish.
And I want to thank Lindley Reese for providing sort of the legal context for this. So I have some extensive contacts to disclose. They're not all technically ex parte contact disclosures, but it's council's advice that we all go the extra mile in doing these disclosures. And what's a little more complicated in my life right now is that in addition to being a full-time member of the council, I'm also on the May ballot, which means I'm at community forums and events and gatherings, and that means that dozens, if not hundreds of people are regularly sharing their views with me on many different subjects. So I'm going to read into the record, Mayor, a somewhat more extensive ex parte contact disclosure with the caveat that this goes well beyond what the law provides, but I think is designed to set a standard of transparency. So since the last hearing council held on this topic, I have had numerous conversations with people about this land use proceeding, and I have read numerous media accounts. What I have not done is solicit information or feedback from anyone about the substantive issues in this case. Generally speaking, the contacts break out into two categories. First, media reports. I have read news reports on this matter. Reporters have asked me to comment on the issue. In each instance, I've been clear that because we are in the middle of a land use proceeding, it would not be appropriate for me to discuss the merits of the case, and I haven't. But I have seen and read a number of media reports, as have, I believe, most of my colleagues. Community feedback. Because this issue has been in the public domain for a while, and there are a number of other issues the council has taken up in addition, including Central City 2035, changes to the comp plan, and a number of things we'll be taking up today on a legislative matter. I think we can all appreciate that in the course of a day, we run into lots of people who have lots of opinions about issues involving land use in our city. And I think it's safe to say that since we last met, I have spoken to hundreds of community members about lots of things. And in some instances, I've been approached at meetings, forums, and candidate events with people providing unsolicited feedback. When I have been approached about the specific issues in the Fremont Apartments matter, I've been careful to tell people that because there's an open land use matter, I cannot discuss the substance of the matter. I can talk maybe conceptually about procedure, but this is not a legislative matter, so we are not as free to discuss the merits. This has not always prevented people from sharing their opinions with me, and in those cases, what I've generally heard has been in the category of either someone expressing support or opposition to the tentative decision the council made, or a broader discussion about housing in the city and the region. I have not received much in the way of feedback what I would call substantive, meaning I have not had conversations with people about specific design features, where a window would go, how a building would be designed, where a retaining wall would be placed, or other kinds of things, which are the kinds of issues which technically ex parte communications are meant to screen in terms of disclosure. Drilling a little deeper, I want to share some specific examples of things that could constitute ex parte contacts. I have spoken with a number of reporters, including Rachel Monahan from Willamette Week and Gordon Friedman from the Oregonian. I have talked generally with the mayor about the procedural posture of this case. I have heard from people, as I mentioned before, on both sides who either agreed or disagreed with our tentative decision. I have taken some care to ensure that I have not spoken directly to the applicant or the appellant about the merits of the proposal. That said, Mayor and colleagues, and to the members of the public that are here, I continue to believe that I can be fair and impartial in my deliberations on this matter. Thank you.
Commissioner Fish, Commissioner Daly?
Similarly to Commissioner Fish, I have had no ex parte contact with the appellant or the applicant. I have read one or more news articles in the Willamette Week and a few handfuls of comments online with interesting speculations as to why I and we voted the way we did. I barely remember them, and they were not substantive either.
Very good. Commissioner Saltzman, then Commissioner Fritz.
Like Commissioner Fish said, I've read media accounts of our previous decision. I read an opinion piece by Stan Pinkin in Sunday's Oregonian that was not point blank about this, but certainly referenced this. I received an email from Doug Klotz yesterday in regard to the Fremont Place decision, and I have received an email from a developer who took us to task about our decision, along with a lot of other issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you. The same week as we had made the tentative decision, I had my regularly scheduled meeting with Commissioner Fish, and we talked briefly, as is the case when you think that a case is already done, that we were happy that the outcome had been as it was and that it was based on the Greenway setback. We also discussed that was on the record in the hearing that there might be a higher development in the future, and that could well happen, and that we thought that the appellant was aware of that. The following week, I had a regularly scheduled meeting with the mayor. He told me, I again expressed the same kinds of general satisfaction for what had gone down. He told me that he would be moving to reconsider the discussion, the tentative vote. I believe my exact words were, "Are you crazy?" And I then...
I think that's right.
Yes. I said that, well, then we can't talk about it anymore because it's now back in the realm of a quasi-judicial ex parte contact, that we can't be having this conversation, and I changed the subject. I had my regular meeting with Commissioner Daly, and she brought up the topic. I said that we can't discuss it because it's an ex parte. She said that she had had a meeting with she had talked about it with the mayor in general, but without reaching any conclusions. I've had no contact with Commissioner Saltzman. I think our meeting got cancelled in the interim. I've had several emails that I read immediately after the decision, again, as I thought, as I have for the last 25 years of participating, that once you have a tentative vote, that everything is pretty much done except a formality. I received emails against the decision from Ivan Robinson, Joe Recker, Ron Dew, and Rich Frank. All of those said, why did you vote in favour of views? To which my response was, I didn't, and it was based on the Greenway setback and other factors, that there would likely be more development under a future application. I received an email from Elizabeth Hawthorne congratulating us on making the decision based on the Greenway and asking the question, would a new application be subject to the inclusionary housing policy? To which I said, yes, I believe it will. Those all arrived before I realised that we were back into a quasi-judicial. All subsequent emails, I've read the title and if the title wasn't specific, I've read the first line, whether for or against. I have then responded to the constituent that it's a live application. I can't discuss this, and I can't read the rest of your email. I read the op-ed by Stan Penkin in the Oregonian last week, and I also was told by staff for the hearing this afternoon that the applicant pointed out an error in the development standards or in the new code that we'll be voting on this afternoon. And I said, well, that maybe indicates that they're planning to reapply. And that, I believe, is the extent of my ex parte contacts.
Very good. I, too, have had various contacts over the last couple of weeks. I've had no ex parte contacts with either the applicant or the appellants. I have certainly had opinions expressed to me at the grocery store, on the treadmill, at my daughter's school, at the car wash, and other places. None of them, in my opinion, went anywhere beyond what had been said already on the record. I've certainly read a number of media accounts. Emails have come in, and again, they've mostly been terse and to the point, either supportive or opposed to our prior action. I had contact with Willamette Week reporter Rachel Monahan, but that was done through my staff. They delivered a quote in a March 14th article on my behalf. I supported that quote. It was consistent with my commentary on the record during the hearing. I also had contact with Portland Tribune reporter Jim Redden through my staff, again, who delivered the same quote that was given to Rachel Monahan, although I don't believe that the quotes that were provided were actually printed in the article. I'm aware that my staff has had contact with the applicant, but I want to make it extremely clear that I have been screened off from those specific conversations, and I'm unaware of any information provided by those conversations. I've had conversations with my colleagues, as just very accurately described, mostly around procedure, including my desire to revisit this issue, but there has not been any substantive discussion around the merits or demerits. Does anybody in the council chamber wish to ask any or all of us any questions about the ex parte contacts that we have just discussed?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to ask you more specifically what you remember about your contacts with each of your colleagues that led you to believe that announcing in the press that you were going to move to reconsider might have a good chance of passing.
So from my perspective, I have no idea and had no idea whether there would be a good chance of passing. My conversation was really around the question of procedure, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention here, I had conversations with our legal counsel around procedure. In the days subsequent, I started to wonder why other options could not be available in terms of asking the applicant specifically to address the issues which were raised on the record by us and by people in the chamber. And after those conversations, I concluded that I would tell my colleagues what my intention was procedurally with regard to a reconsideration. I don't think I had a conversation with Dan. I'm pretty sure with Commissioner Udaley and Commissioner Fish, I did have that conversation.
Yeah, that conversation was strictly procedural. We didn't get into the details of the case.
And by the way, you know, Commissioner Fritz said something earlier that I think is important, and this case, if it serves no other useful purpose as a historical case, will remind people that, as we've all learned, that the period of time between a tentative vote and adoption of findings is still a live quasi-judicial legal proceeding to which we are bound by the same rules. And that may be counterintuitive to some people, and it may make sense to others, but we did get clear legal guidance on that, which we have shared with the media and with people that have approached us. And I think the logic of that to me is that a tentative vote is a tentative vote. and it is subject to a subsequent hearing where proposed findings come forward, and we're still deliberating. And because of that, we've been advised by counsel that we're still bound by the rules that apply to quasi-judicial proceedings. And I think all of us make significant efforts to make sure that we don't get into the sausage making around the design planning and other kinds of things, because that's the essence of what a quasi-judicial proceeding is. That seems to me separate from listening to people who think you're either a complete idiot for how you voted or support it, or wonder procedurally how these things work and how the council ended up where they landed. It is a fine line, and I hope that we all strive to err on, being on one side of that line.
So, colleagues, I move to formally reconsider our March 7th tentative vote in this matter.
Second.
I've made a motion. There's a second. Colleagues, I'd like to discuss this project, the area that we're talking about, and again, I'm just reiterating that what is already on the record is it's planned for development, and development will happen on the site. So no development has never been an option for this particular site. On the record, I discussed concerns that I had for the protection of the greenway setback, and we heard testimony in support of the idea, which I support, which is that how we choose to do this project will set the standard for all of the other development projects that will happen in that same immediate area. And that, of course, includes the treatment of the bike and pedestrian path along the riverway. And it is my belief that through further discussion, we may be able to find a way to have these concerns that were on the record addressed and meet the overall objectives of the project. So that is my thinking, and if there is no other discussion, I will call the roll.
Oh, there is.
Commissioner
I have
Fritz.
some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, since we'll be voting on the findings, I'd like to know, has everybody read the findings that were delivered to us yesterday?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner, what do you mean by since we're voting on the findings?
Well, if we, the findings outline why the council voted 5-0 to deny the application and approve the appeal. So this lays out why the council and our legal counsel believes that we should not reconsider the record or reconsider that vote, that this is the basis of our decision. So I would like to know if everybody has read it, because I believe that this matter will get appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals and possibly in the courts as well. And if that's the basis for, it should be the basis for our discussion today, are we going to approve the findings or not? So I'd like to know if everybody has read them all.
So can I make a comment, Mayor?
Yeah, please, Commissioner
or maybe
Fish.
I can seek clarification from you since you're making the motion. My understanding is that if a majority of the council wants to reconsider the tentative vote, then the next conversation we would have is where do we go from here? And then we would have the menu of options, including adopting the draft findings, modifying those findings, and or we would have the option of giving the applicant an opportunity to make appropriate changes to the design of this project consistent with concerns that council has raised. Am I on the right track?
Are you asking me? Yes, and that's my intention. My intention will be to, assuming there's an agreement here, if there is no agreement, we'll accept the appeal. If there is an agreement, my intention would be to continue the hearing, open up the record, and give the applicant the opportunity to address the concerns that were raised during the initial hearing, which is our right.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Go
ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Mayor, what was your thinking about doing a motion to reconsider as opposed to just requiring the applicant to submit a new application?
This was advice that was given to me from a procedural perspective. Maybe I should call on legal counsel at this point. We could do either from my perspective, but it was my understanding that this was the preferred legal strategy. And if that's not, I'd love to know. If we can simply direct it, great.
So Commissioner Saltzman, what were the two alternatives you were?
Well, I was asking the mayor what his thinking was behind doing a motion to reconsider and in essence sort of, revisiting the decision and perhaps making changes,
and
as opposed to simply requiring the applicant we granted the appeal, which meant we denied the application, so why not simply say to the applicant, submit a new application?
So part of the answer is going to be around time frame, but there may be some other legal issues here that I'm not completely aware of. If they have to go through they would have to go through the whole process again. Is that correct?
If we deny the application, they would need to reapply and start over, correct?
Correct.
And what's the issue with the time frame?
So from a legal perspective, either option is available. My understanding was that, and I won't speak for the mayor, but because the issues that he had identified with the Greenway were more limited in nature rather than redesign of the entire project, that perhaps that was something that could have been addressed through a minor revision as opposed to starting over. But that is
correct.
certainly something that council
I was on the record with a very specific objection.
Okay, then if I might, I'll just continue then with why we should not reconsider the approval. Just one clarification from legal counsel. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability memorandum from the March 5th, is that in the record? If you could check on that for me. And in the meantime, I'm just going to...
I don't know the answer to that.
So we did, I did, and the council agreed 5-0, agree with a multiple list of problems with this application. The Greenway was part of it and one of the biggest parts of it. One of the other problems was the bulk of the building, the fact that it's asking for increased length from 200 to, I believe, 230. I don't have
30,
it.
yeah.
Thank you, 230 feet. That's a significant change if that's to be changed. The shade on the Greenway was part of it, and also the shade on the public plaza. There was no water features, there's no art, the bicycle parking is inadequate. And if I'm allowed to talk about the Bureau of Planning memo, I can add some more things.
This was a BDS memo or a BPS memo?
I believe it was Planning and Sustainability.
I thought it was.
And I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of that in my materials.
It was a memo dated the 5th, which described, and it went into the views, the fact that the views from the Fields Park are not protected. And that was part of the council discussion, that we all agree that views are not private views are not protected, and that was not part of the decision. It's not part of the findings. So I'm hesitant to say anything because we haven't reopened the record. I will just, so going back over those, it wasn't just a small thing that could be fixed easily. It's multiple different project problems with this application that are outlined are specified in the findings. If we agree to continue this application and allow it basically a new project to be submitted, that means that staff are putting all their time in with no pay. It means a very much different way of community members interacting and giving their input onto any revised project. It's, as I said, unprecedented, and I strongly urge my colleagues to stick with the denial and not to vote not to reconsider. The rules. I won't go further because I don't know if it's in the record.
Okay, so unless anybody has anything burning, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the reconsideration.
So I'll make sure the vote, so a yes vote means yes to reconsider, no vote means
correct.
No. That is correct.
And as I understand it, a yes on the motion to reconsider still gives us all the options available to us.
So I will walk through it very briefly. The motion to reconsider takes you back to the point in time after which Commissioner Fritz had made her initial motion, and you will then have to vote on that motion again. thumbs up, thumbs down, and at that point, then the slate is clean and you can determine what you want to do from there, if we get to that point.
Okay.
So there'll be 2 votes before you get to what is our new option.
Please call the roll.
Fish.
So I'm going to support the motion to reconsider for the following reasons. In the last hearing, Commissioner Fritz identified significant shortcomings of this project, which is reflected in a document that's in the record. And after council discussion, we were left with what was in essence a binary choice, to either grant the appeal or deny the appeal. In prior land use proceedings that I've been a party to, we've often had a third option, which is to place conditions on some action we take, or in this instance, to at least explore the question of whether the matter could be submitted back to the Design Commission for further action. Now, I understand that is a murky legal issue that doesn't have a clear answer. And frankly, on that question, Mayor, I think we need to consider some code work in the future that gives the council the clear and unambiguous authority when we're faced with questions like this to send it back to the administrative body for further proceedings. I seem to recall Commissioner Saltzman, when we had this hearing last time, saying, in effect, that he didn't want us to effectively become the design review commission for the city of Portland. And the truth is that a lot of these cases are being appealed to us, and we're in effect been asked to substitute our judgment for an administrative body that we've appointed, and I agree with him on that. What is not clear to me when we've identified what we think are shortcomings, it's not clear to me why we can't just direct that it go back to the administrative body that reviewed it with our comments and say, have another hearing on it and see if these things can be worked out. It seems to me that's at least a third or fourth option that the council should have, and I understand that the legal issue is not clear, but I'm going to support the motion to reconsider so we can have that conversation. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, we had a very good hearing on this. Lots of people testified, pro and con. And I really didn't have, real strong feelings one way or the other, but I was really impressed with the quality of the testimony and the quality of the council discussion on this matter. And I ultimately sided with Commissioner Fritz, and as Commissioner Fish just said, I was loath to see this council become the Design Commission. And I am concerned that's exactly the door we're opening if we vote to reconsider this, is we're going to end up being the ones that ultimately redesign this project with help from the applicant, with the applicant speaking to the concerns that we expressed. And I just don't feel that's the right way to be approaching it. It just seems to lack a certain credibility to me. And I don't think I've ever done a reconsideration on a tentative land use decision before. So I feel the best course is to keep it clean, have the applicant resubmit an application, revised application, let it go through the process, and maybe it won't end up here on appeal. But I feel that's the way we should go, and therefore I would support, I don't support the motion to reconsider, no.
Udaley.
So I was surprised by the way the tentative vote went. There were a number of complex issues and concerns raised very late in the hearing that I didn't feel we could adequately address in the moment, and I was not prepared to offer solutions to them. By the time it came to my vote, there were 3 votes, and there's reasons to be on the prevailing side, even if you don't agree. So I voted yes. But my concerns with this project center around the Greenway. I think that a number of the other issues raised are relatively cosmetic, would not require a major redesign of the building. And I want to acknowledge the time and expense that the developer has put into this and what what it could mean to them potentially to have to do an entirely new application process, and the message that we're sending to the larger development community. I vote aye.
Fritz.
This is about this application, and this application, for the reasons that are outlined or detailed in the findings, doesn't meet the approval criteria on multiple different factors. So I share Commissioner Saltzman's concern that we are becoming, actually that all bets are off. That's essentially what this means, is that no developer or no neighborhood can rely on what happens at council, because, or at the design commission, the process is completely blown apart. As you've been on the council 20 years almost, right, Commissioner? It's never happened before, and it's opening the door to anybody who doesn't like a decision lobbying outside of the process and getting what they want. No.
Wheeler.
So I've only been on the council for a little while, and I think this is probably my third or maybe my fourth design review appeal, and my recollection is we have, in fact, expressed preferences and added conditions and redesigned buildings as a council. I remember one very vividly, based on the input that we received. This process, as loathsome as it is, gives us a tentative vote followed by a final vote for this very reason. I share everybody's desire not to be the design review commission. It is very constrained. It limits our abilities to have a discussion amongst ourselves, and it is highly misleading to the public because people, and even the press to some degree, interpret this as a commentary on our views around affordable housing, and the reality is that has nothing to do with this conversation. This is an appeal from a design review hearing, and we are acting as the appeal board for a design review process. And so if through later processes I could get us out of this, believe me, I would, but I vote aye. The motion carries. Clerk, please call the roll on the revote of Commissioner Fritz's March 7th motion to tentatively grant the appeal and deny the application.
Fish. Oh, I'm sorry, Lindley, did you?
So maybe
And
just
yes, go ahead,
I was just going to
please.
say, to be clear, a yes vote means that you are voting to grant the appeal and deny the application.
Correct.
A no vote means that you want to clean the slate.
So may I please speak in, about the motion?
Please.
Thank you. So they're not minor tweaks that can be changed with small conditions of approval. That's the reason. If under a land use proceeding, the council is required to allow it if it can meet the approval criteria with conditions of approval. This cannot. It cannot meet the conditions of approval. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. It's not just the greenway, it's the greenway shadow, the way the building overlooks the greenway and shades it. If you would, colleagues, please turn to the findings on page 34, where it talks about the modification, about the maximum building dimension. This is a standard. It has to be met unless you can find that the resulting development would better meet the applicable design guidelines. The standard under 33, 510, 251, D3, B, C says maximum building dimension. The maximum building dimension is 200 feet. This standard applies to both length and depth. And the findings talk about the proposed increase in the maximum building dimension from 200 feet to nearly 231 feet lies in the direction perpendicular to the river is inconsistent with the purpose. A narrower building that meets this standard would more afford visual connections to the river and its activities. The proposed modifications would serve in the opposite purpose. So if you're talking about changing a building dimension by 31 feet, that is not a minor tweak. That is not something that can be added as a condition of approval. The other one that also cannot be changed as a condition of approval is on page 33 of the findings, which talks about the required open area development standards, the shadow standard, that requires not more than 50% of the plaza area to be covered by shadows at noon on April 21st of any year. And the proposal has 84% shading. it's not possible to condition approval to require less shading. And this is a standard that needs to, again, better meet the purpose. And if you read the findings, you will find out why it doesn't. So it's not just, let's think about this a little differently. It's going to require a fundamentally new application. And I strongly urge, even though we're now reconsidering this, vote again the way that you did last time.
Very good. Please call the roll. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fish.
So I was following very closely what Commissioner Frisch just said. Could you remind us again about what a yes and a no vote refers to?
So you're voting to Commissioner Fritz's motion, which is to tentatively uphold the appeal and deny the application. So a yes vote means you support Commissioner Fritz's motion to deny the application.
Okay.
A no vote means that you would like there to be a different motion.
Okay.
Please call the roll, Carla.
Fish.
No.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
No.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
No, the motion fails. So colleagues, now this is next steps, and we may have more than one motion, but I'd like to put a motion on the table. I move to continue the hearing until May 10th and reopen the record. The applicant would have until April 11th at 5 p.m., and I understand this is a very tight time frame, to submit revisions to their application, and by April 18th, the Bureau of Development Service staff will mail notice of the continued hearing and the opportunity to submit testimony and evidence in response to any revisions. Participants may submit written testimony and evidence on the revised plans, and the council will accept oral testimony on the revised plans on May 10th at 2 p.m. That is my motion.
So Mayor, let me address that motion for a second.
Please.
I have two concerns with it. The first is the timeline, because it doesn't seem particularly reasonable in light of the extensive issues that this council has flagged. And number two, I still want to have a discussion about remanding this to the Design Review Commission for purposes of having them review any changes, which has two potential beneficial impacts. One is we get the benefit of their review, and second, it may or may not be appealed back to this body. But it seems to me, even though the law is murky on this, I'd like to understand why we're not actively considering a remand to the administrative body that has the primary role in our system for reviewing these kinds of applications.
I'll tell you why. I don't want to end up in the inner circle of hell, because they have already voted on this, and I would see a likely response be that they simply take the same vote and send it right back here again.
Then I'll ask a question. How do you know that the applicant can respond by April 11th?
I do not know.
Seems an unreasonable time frame.
It may be that they do not.
So what is driving the time frame? It seems
there is no particular driving of the time frame. I'm happy to extend it unless legal counsel can give me any reason why that would not be appropriate.
Why is legal counsel?
Typically, I will ask the applicant and staff whether we have an extension of the 120-day clock. That's our primary time limitation. In this case, the applicant has waived the 120 days.
So we could extend the time frame, is that correct?
That is my understanding.
Does the appellant have any right to a decision within a certain time frame?
No.
So Mayor, if we're going to follow this path and give the applicant an opportunity to provide us with a different design, a design that's going to have to meet the markers that a number of us have placed down in terms of concerns we had with the original design, and in light of your concern for, creating some monster here, I would strongly urge that we set a reasonable amount of time for the additional design work to be done and presentation prepared, because they're going to get one chance to come back to council, and it's not entirely clear that council is going to feel like they've gone far enough. So I don't want the excuse to be that they didn't have enough time to address the numerous substantive concerns that the council has on the record.
Very good. That is compelling. Could we set a different date? What is an appropriate time frame, Commissioner Fish?
I'm not qualified to answer that. It just seems to me this is a very tight time frame for the kinds of changes we've requested. I would suggest that we give them a month or two and then come back.
So we have two options here. So staff tells me that the full extension expires May 24th. So that would give us potentially, if we're coming back on the 10th, or the 10th. I'm sorry, thinking through dates. Let me back up for a moment. As somebody who used to work in private practice, one of the benefits of private practice versus being in the public sector is that architects can work day and night. I'm not going to opine on the applicant's folks, but my sense is if council tells them a particular time frame, they will get what needs to be done in a particular time frame. If we're going to try and get a final decision, adoption of findings done by late May, you could extend it by probably another week and give them 2 weeks to respond, but I don't really think that if you go beyond that, I don't think we're going to meet the May 24th deadline.
I thought they said I thought they've waived the time limits.
They have waived it. One of the state law provides that they can provide extensions up to 200. They can provide extensions up to 365 days. I'm assuming what that means is the 365 days expires on May 24th. State law does not provide a particular consequence, but it is our practice to comply with state law, and therefore I would tell you we would try to comply by having our decision done within 365 days.
Okay.
So what is the latest date then that we could give the applicant to submit the revisions, and when would we hold the hearing?
That probably be it, Mayor, because otherwise you can't get the findings back.
Right. So another week out would put it at the 17th. Is there time available on the 17th? Or 16th?
Okay, it'd be 4 o'clock on May 17th.
Great.
This is not going to be a short hearing. And there's nothing on the 16th?
Yes.
Yes, there is nothing, or yes, there is?
There is. It'd be 4 o'clock on the 16th as well.
4 o'clock. That's ridiculous.
So would it be, the record right now remains closed until council has voted on this, but I might recommend that council reopen the record for the purposes of hearing whether the applicant, or at least I'll ask the applicant whether they think they can get it done within a week, since May 10th seems to be a good date.
Okay, that would be helpful for me.
Okay, so the motion stands. Is there a second?
Well, no, the motion is just to reopen the record to get that information. Is that correct?
Right now, the motion is the full motion from the mayor.
Which includes reopening the record.
I will say that it is my understanding that 7 days can work.
That's your understanding?
That is my understanding.
Well,
Okay,
it's going to have to. That's the timeline.
And that's the timeline.
Second.
So we have a motion and we have a second. I appreciate the list that Commissioner Fritz has given, and I want to reiterate a couple of things that I said on the record. This is not about views for me. There are no protected views from this particular location. My primary concerns relate to the Greenway setback, and we took lots and lots of testimony on the Greenway setback. I am personally not particularly concerned about orientation or height, and I am okay with increasing the podium size. Those are, from my perspective, acceptable options. I don't know if somebody, well, I'll go ahead and just call the roll on the motion.
Fish.
So at the last hearing, I laid out some very specific concerns that I had, and I expect them to be addressed in any redesign. And supporting the mayor's motion, I am reserving the right to all the options that I would have otherwise when this matter comes back. But I believe that in this instance, giving the applicant the opportunity to address the concerns we raised and redesign the project and come back to council is in the public interest, and therefore I vote aye.
Saltzman?
My concern with the timeline, and even if it's a later timeline, is bypassing the design commission. I mean, that, to me, really is setting us up on May 10th or whatever date to be designing this project. And I think the design commission, for better or worse, serves as an important check and balance on this council in these types of decisions. And so I would prefer to see some sort of expedited role for the design commission in this, and I don't see that in this timeline. So I vote no.
Udaley?
I also want to be clear that my original stance on this had nothing to do with views, which is a popular public sentiment. And I also want to be clear, I'm not particularly excited about more market and luxury rate housing. But it's not my job, that's not my job to determine what will go on this site. The job that remains is determining if we are making reasonable modifications and if we were getting public benefit back. So as with the mayor and Commissioner Fish, my primary concern is the Greenway and how this building is going to affect our built environment, integrate or not integrate into the community. I also am not concerned with heights. I'm not terribly concerned with a 230-foot building versus 200. I mean, that's a 15% increase. We have the smallest city blocks, I believe, in any major city. And we have a unique site that's sandwiched between a river and a roadway. So I don't know when we have these conversations. Is it when we come back? Okay. So I vote, wait, where are we? Lindley?
Yes to support the motion to
I
continue the
vote
hearing.
to support the motion, which I actually seconded. So there you go. It's complicated.
Fritz?
No, and I'd like to have a comment after you've voted.
Wheeler?
Aye, the motion carries. Commissioner Fritz, you get the last word.
Since the record has now reopened, I want to make sure that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability memo from March 5th is actually in it. It's, as we all remember, that the current project is allowed to reach the maximum allowed height, including the bonus, which is 175 feet. Under the new comprehensive plan, and a new project would be allowed to go up to 250 feet. So there would be, had the council chosen to have a new application, there would have been additional height and therefore additional units potentially allowed, and I think that's very unfortunate.
Very good. Thank you. Next item, 319.
319, reassign Annie Mahoney and Matthew Roman 2 different membership categories effective April 1, 2018, and appoint Ernestina Fuenmayer to the Historic Landmarks Commission for a term to expire March 31, 2022.
Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Historic Landmarks Commission provides leadership and expertise on maintaining and enhancing the city's historic and architectural heritage. The commission identifies and protects buildings and other properties. Should I wait for a moment for the room to clear? It's a little...
Yeah, why don't you wait
Yeah.
just a sec?
Okay. The commission identifies and protects buildings and other properties that have historic or cultural significance or special architectural merit and provides advice on historic preservation matters. The 7-member volunteer commission meets twice a month for many hours to hear Type 3 land use reviews, Type 2 appeals of staff decisions, to provide design advice prior to land use application, and to provide advice on historic preservation matters to other entities, and we thank them for their service. Anastina Fuenmejor is proposed to fill the appointment for historian on the commission, which is a position aligned with her professional expertise documenting historic places in Portland, the state of Oregon, and abroad. Anastina intends to provide a sense of inclusion to the community through her role on the commission and to help educate the public about what history means and brings to the community. The proposed reassignment of Matthew Roman from historian to public at large member allows Anastina to fill a role more suited to her expertise. The proposed reassignment of registered architect Annie Mahoney from public at large to architect member will fill this specified position, which was vacated by the retirement of Commissioner Karen Carlson. This appointment and 2 reassignments will ensure that the Historic Landmarks Commission is well equipped to fulfill the powers and duties prescribed to them by Title 33. And I believe we have people here today. We want to come up to the
welcome
table. Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I just thought you might like to have
Hello.
a chance to say hello, and my colleagues might want to ask you some questions.
Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. That was a really intense hearing we just had.
Moving right along.
Who's the little one here today?
Juliana.
Juliana, it's a pleasure to meet you. This is the city council. She's not impressed at all. Thank you for your willingness to step forward. What do you see as some of the most important issues that you can help resolve on the commission for us?
Say it again, sorry.
What do you see as being some of the most important issues that you can help us resolve?
Oh, God, there's so many. I'm thinking that because we have a big pressure on the historic buildings that have already been built and the historic district that we already been creating, the new construction that's going on is a big issue that I know we have. And I want to help to see how we can work with the communities and work with the city and creating a good I will say that, a good way to protect the historic buildings and define which ones are the ones that we will help to protect.
Very good. Thank you. And you know, this council has a balancing act to do. As you can imagine, the city is under a lot of pressure around development, and we're also under pressure to protect our historical assets. And as a commissioner, you end up right in the middle of that. And so I just want to say personally, I'm really grateful to people who take the time to serve. So thank you for your willingness to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for choosing me for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, can we just go ahead and take the vote then?
It's a report, yeah.
A report?
I'll move to accept the report.
Commissioner Fish moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Saltzman. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Welcome, and thank you for serving. Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Thank you so much for your service. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item, please, 320.
Authorize limited tax revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $52 million to finance infrastructure improvements in city parks, transportation, civic and other capital assets as contemplated in the city's Build Portland Infrastructure Initiative.
Colleagues, this is an item on second reading. It's already been heard. There's already been a presentation. There's already been public testimony on this item. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thanks for everybody who worked on that. Item 321, please.
Authorize an agreement with ABB US, Inc. for the purchase of streetcar auxiliary power supply and low-voltage power supply equipment using a sole source procurement in an amount not to exceed $1,325,000.
Commissioner Saltzman.
We had a presentation on this last week, and I think, I'm sorry, we did not have a presentation on this. I don't think we had anybody here from the Bureau.
Let's move it to the end of the agenda. And Mustafa, could you see if we can get somebody from the Transportation Bureau to come and speak on 321 or
purchasing, perhaps, yeah.
Or,
either one,
yeah.
But we don't have anybody here.
Could you help us with that, Mustafa? Thanks. Next item, 322, which is a second reading.
Adopt the allocation methodology for the local transportation infrastructure charge, establish a maximum fee, amend charge required code, and direct staff to develop additional components of Neighborhood Streets program.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. There is an amendment that has been circulated, and I don't seem to have it, but I hope all you do. I had it earlier, and it got lost and somewhere in all this paper. But I think it just changes a shall, or it changes a will to a shall. Ann Hill, maybe you can help us on this.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, Mayor Wheeler, and the rest of City Council. My name is Ann Hill, and I work for the Portland Bureau of Transportation as a program manager in the Development, Permitting, and Transit section. So yes, we made two changes. One thing I wanted to ask the council clerk, is this a second reading, or is this?
So it's currently a second.
It is, unless you amend it then.
Okay. So today I will briefly review the amendments addressing the Ombudsman's concerns, along with additional language to apply the LTIC payments to local improvement district assessments. So those were the amendments that you have in front of you. So I believe you received the joint letter from the Ombudsman and the Office of Equity and Human Rights indicating that their concerns previously raised regarding the LTIC have been addressed in the latest draft presented to you today. So specifically, the low income exemption was moved from 50% to 80% AMI. The ability to finance the LTIC assessment, so that was where we changed in the code the wording from to shall, I believe. So implying that we are going to do it upon approval. And that any appeals will be heard first by the Administrative Review Committee, and then they can further be appealed to the city's hearings officer. So those were the changes that the Ombudsman wanted to see, and we're happy to make those. Additionally, based on the conversation here at Council, we did add language to create the application of LTIC payments to local improvement district assessments. So that was to address if someone paid an LTIC assessment and 20 years later there was an LID formed, that the monies that they had paid in the LTIC would be credited towards their LID. So those were the changes we made. We ask for you to adopt the LTIC maximum, the allocation methodology, the Neighborhood Streets framework, which you've already reviewed, and the associated amendments.
Very good. So Commissioner Saltzman, you move that as a package
Yes, I
of
would move
amendment.
that as package.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, and I have a question for the sponsor. Dan, my understanding is both the Office of the Ombudsman and the Office of Equity and Human Rights have reviewed the changes and now support this legislation.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. So without further ado, I will move this to second reading then as amended.
So we have to vote on the amendment?
I'm sorry, you do. I apologize. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll on the amendment package.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The motion carries, and now I will move it to second reading as amended. Thank you, everybody. Item 323, please.
Vacate portions of Northeast Weidler Street and Northeast Halsey Street, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Very good. Commissioner Saltzman.
I will turn this over to staff.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners and Mayor. So I'm here for the Northeast Weidler, Northeast Halsey Street vacation. And I'm Sarah Johnston with the Bureau of Transportation, and I work for right-of-way acquisition. So we have 2 stubs, and it is a city-initiated street vacation due to being kind of requested by the by PBOT Development Review that these stubs be part of the development that's already been put in place. I had some slides here, but I don't know if they showed up.
It's already been put in place?
Well, the development has already happened. It's already been mostly constructed. It's kind of over by the Fred Meyer, and it's Grant Park Village area, off of Broadway.
How could they do the construction before doing the street vacation?
There are no buildings built within where the streets are. They just serve basically this private development, and so it made sense for the Bureau of Transportation to no longer have responsibility over maintaining these streets to a private development.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's see here. All right, so you can see, I don't know if you can see the slides, but we show here where the streets are. Now in the center between Halsey and Weidler, there's actually a building under construction. And I think, yeah, so these pictures show it. So that street angle right there is the southern street, so the one closest to I-84. And you can see where the new building has now already been put in place. And over this street right here is where Parks has a trail easement to go for access to the Sullivan's Gulch Trail that's proposed to be put in along the highway there. And that's another view. That one's Weidler Street. And that's where the New Seasons is at along Broadway right there, and that's their parking garage. Oh, and that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. You said that there's Parks has asked for an easement for the Sullivan's Gulch Trail. Will there be any required contribution from the developer in order to be able to actually construct that trail when the rest gets done?
So I don't know. So the developer is going to, they have paved and they've actually given, as part of the easement, they've given an easement over their private parcel that goes along there also. So they did not charge us for that as part of the negotiations with the street vacation. They're going to be paying for paving and making the passageway to it, but as far as paying anything towards the Sullivan's Gulch Trail, I don't think so.
Are they going to be improving the trail on their property?
Right, that's correct. They will be. They're doing, they have a paved portion that will be, it's still going to be paved through there as a roadway. And so they're paying to make that pavement, you know, to put in the pavement there and the sidewalks and stuff. So as far as that goes, the developer is paying for that part.
I guess, will it be clear that where the public access easement is and where pedestrians and cyclists are allowed to go as by right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the developer is the one putting in the path that connects to the Sullivan's Gulch Trail.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. Any further questions?
There was some concern from another property owner. Is that correct? Is there another property owner that's involved in this?
There's no other property owner involved in it. The reason why the city initiated it was because Fred Meyer had agreed to sign, but they don't own their property where their building is, and they were in agreement with the street vacation going through. But Benderson owns the property that Fred Meyer has their building on, and they said that they didn't want to sign the street vacation petition based on the fact that their tenant is what they believed a competitor with New Seasons, which was going in as part of the development. So no other property owners were in disagreement with it, and the neighborhood association was in full support.
So who owns the new development?
Capstone Partners. They've been paying for the entire street vacation.
And So then, so Benderson gets to weigh in because their property abuts it, is that?
That is correct.
But it's not needed for access to their property?
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Fish, did you have, oh, I'm sorry. Any public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one signed up.
Very good. This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading.
Great.
Thank you very much. I understand that we have somebody here for item 321.
321, authorize an agreement with ABB US Inc. for the purchase of streetcar auxiliary power supply and low-voltage power supply equipment using a sole source procurement in an amount not to exceed $1,325,000.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. My apologies for not being here earlier. So this is a request.
You say your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Catherine Levine. I work for the Bureau of Transportation with Streetcar Division. This is a request for a sole source contract in order to do some very needed capital maintenance. We worked with the procurement section on the acquisition of the low voltage power supply and low voltage batteries that are needed for the oldest cars. Our maintenance manager actually spent a considerable amount of time trying to find parts that would be available to make the improvements to the vehicles and was able to find 2 potential suppliers. The work that was done is shown in the attachment to the ordinance. So the bottom line is that the least expensive option is to work through a vendor who has done the very same type of work and replacement for what I would call one of our sister streetcar cities in Tacoma. So ABB has designed and replaced the inverters in the Tacoma Link system. So we know that they will be successful and that they will work. The only other potential provider is a very large firm that gave us a quote that is slightly smaller, but did not include installation and engineering, which we know to be considerable cost. So we worked with the procurement staff. They did a notice of intent to do a sole source contract to make sure that there weren't any other vendors available. We received no objections to the sole source, and we moved forward with the ordinance that's before you today.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Any public testimony on this item?
One person signed up, Shedrick J. Wilkins.
Here he is. Come on up, sir.
Well, since I have a degree in electrical engineering from Portland State, every time I see something that says something about electricity, I get stimulated. So the thing about this is I think there in the Obama years has been an astounding amount of research into electrical cars. When I was at PSU, everything was big giant generators the size of a house with AC and 3-phase, but there was an underlying development idea that we would have electric cars. They would be DC, lower voltage. You know, this is not 3-phase. A lot of waste is wasted when you transmit power that way. I'd like to learn more about these systems. When Obama first came in, they made a tidal wave generating farm off in the sea off the coast of Newport, right? And a lot of times when you have these little generators or even a streetcar, you can put these things on a truck and bring it in, but you got to wire everything up. And these tidal wave generators only make 1,000 watts, but there are ways with power transistors to amalgamate the electricity to the point where it could push a streetcar, right? And in the old, this stuff interests me because it's real, you know. And in Halloween 2016, I saw a Tesla car at Pioneer Square, and you realize that there's probably no difference than this in some little kid's little car. And then you have the old, and it goes down the freeway, and yet you have a souped-up mechanical engine, but this thing works, and it's acceptable. And I find this mixing the two together, that someday in Newport, there might be streetcars going up and down that are powered by the ocean waves going up and down. But the miracle of the whole thing is the power transistor itself. There are transistors this big that amalgamate power and distribute power. And this is totally different than the old three-phase Tesla stuff. You know, the Bonneville Dam has generators the size of a house, which came from England, by the way. We couldn't make them. We had to bring them in. And I think, too, the Portland streetcar is another example where some of this stuff is not that big, but people can ride in the streetcar. So we're getting back to the way we were in the 1890s. But some of this new transistor stuff that didn't occur till the 60s. And it's more efficient, by the way.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion, colleagues? Please call the roll, Carla.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for your work. Aye.
Wheeler.
Thanks, Catherine. I vote aye. The ordinance passes. Last item, 324.
Amend the building regulations to include building permit requirements for retaining walls over 4 feet in height and maintenance agreements for shared building elements across a property line.
Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2017, the State of Oregon Building Codes Division adopted changes to the Oregon Residential Specialty Code. These changes took effect on January 1st, 2018. Most of the changes represent minor adjustments to construction specifications. However, 2 permit requirements were removed regarding retaining walls and maintenance agreements for shared building elements across a property line. These 2 requirements were removed from the residential code as part of BCD's effort to focus the building code directly on housing construction and less on development that does not directly impact a building. As such, some retaining walls over 4 feet in height and maintenance agreements were removed from the code. BDS is proposing to add these 2 requirements to our local code, Title 24 Building Regulations. Mika Keenan and Doug Morgan are here today from BDS to discuss the proposed changes and to answer any questions you might have. Hopefully, not many.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Commissioner. Thank you. And thank you all for hearing what I think you'll find is a relatively short presentation today. My name is Mika Keenan. I'm a Code and Policy Analyst with the Bureau of Development Services. I'm here today with Doug Morgan, who's the Supervising Engineer with the Site Development Team at the Bureau of Development Services. And we're here today to talk to you about 2 proposed amendments to Title 24. So as Commissioner Udaly mentioned, in 2017, the Oregon Building Codes Division released a set of amendments, about 400 of them, to the statewide building code. And since that time, our plan review staff has had the opportunity to go through training and to apply these new regulations. And what they have flagged for us are 2 significant changes to the building code that they asked be addressed. So those pertain to retaining walls and maintenance agreements. So I'll talk to you about the retaining wall piece of it first, and then we'll talk about the maintenance agreements. So the state building code will continue to require permits for retaining walls over 4 feet when they directly impact a regulated building. So if you think about new construction coming in or an addition and there's a retaining wall associated with that development, the state building code will continue to require a permit and review for that development of the retaining wall. However, what they removed are retaining any other retaining wall in this city. So they're no longer requiring permits for other retaining walls. So if you think about all the places that we see retaining walls in the city, around sidewalks, parking lots, parks, fields, any number of structures. So we believe that it is important to continue to regulate these retaining walls and that they go through the permit process to make sure that it's structurally sound so that they receive an inspection, and basically to make sure that these structures are still safe. So we are proposing that we move that requirement into our local regulations, Title 24. So the second proposed amendment is as it pertains to maintenance agreements. So maintenance agreements are legal documents that are pretty typical in development, and you'll see them in any number of development types when there is a shared element across a property line. So it could be a utility, it could be a driveway, it could be any facility that is shared between two property owners. And really, they do exactly what you would think they would do. They spell out the maintenance requirements for that shared facility. Any repairs, any access that's granted in that easement area. So that was required in our building code, but has been removed, and we are proposing that maintenance agreements requirements also be added to Title 24. So in closing, just to be clear about this, we are not proposing any changes to our application requirements. Our permitting, review, and inspections procedures will remain status quo. It's really just a way to make sure that we maintain consistency with how we are permitting and reviewing building development and these retaining walls.
Great. Colleagues, any further questions? Commissioner Fritz?
You handed out an amendment to Exhibit A to add something to 247085D.
Oh, what is the one that we submitted today?
Yes.
That was a typo that our technical expert caught this morning, so he can explain that change.
The Exhibit A that was submitted to council originally, Doug Morgan with Bureau of Development Services for the record.
AKA technical expert.
The Exhibit A that was submitted to council this morning had a typographical error in it that left out a portion of 2 sentences. So the additional document there is just a correction to that.
Legal counsel, does that constitute a Scribner's error? Do we require a formal motion and a vote?
The safest thing to do would be just to adopt the amendment, but if what is in Exhibit A
We've already spent too much time talking about it. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second.
I'd like a clarification. Is this underlined wording already in the code?
Yes, the standards we've adopted for retaining walls or are proposing to adopt are consistent with past practice.
No, I'm trying to understand the Scrivener's error part of it. Comparing it, when I'm looking at the Exhibit D, there's no proposed changes to it. There is a proposed change.
That proposed change that you see in front of you would move into Exhibit A. So it would replace what's in Exhibit A right now, the underlined portion.
But this is just more specific.
That's correct.
Yes, so okay. It's good that we've got a motion then. Thank you.
Call the roll on the amendment.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you to both our technical experts. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Thank you to our technical expert for catching that little error. Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Good proofreading solves a lot of problems down the road. Thank you for that excellent work. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended, and we're adjourned.